15 minutes to tell you a quick story about how I think politics is changing and why it matters, and I thought I would do it with reference to our good friends at Cambridge Analytica. You all are familiar, roughly, with the Cambridge Analytica story, are you not, given you're here? Of course, it's been in the news all the time. Well, I covered this story for the BBC 18 months ago, and no one paid any attention to it. I'm not bitter about that, honestly, it's totally fine. I'm glad the Observer's getting all the credit. But I did, in fact, interview Alexander Nix 18 months ago and the people running Donald Trump's digital campaigns in San Antonio, Texas. And most of what has been reported about Cambridge Analytica we already covered. And I think the way the story of Cambridge Analytica has been talked about is almost entirely wrong, highly misleading and uncomfortable. I want to tell you what I think happened and why it matters. So the story that you may have heard, roughly speaking, is that Cambridge Analytica, using some magic psychological warfare tool developed by Steve Bannon, managed to trick millions of people who would have voted for Hillary Clinton into voting for Donald Trump instead because they saw some Facebook adverts. Now, forget Brexit because they didn't really work on Brexit. But does that not strike you as slightly unlikely? I mean, does anyone ever feel like they've had their minds changed by a Facebook advert? I mean, does anyone even work in digital advertising here? Wouldn't it be brilliant if you could send out some adverts and change millions of people's minds? No, this is not quite what happened. But it's still very important. In fact, I think it's more important than it's generally understood. So what Cambridge Analytica did, one of many companies that have done basically the same thing, is over several months, couple of years, they collected or bought from commercially available data sources 5,000 data points on 250 million Americans. Credit record, gun ownership, car ownership, mortgage scores, what magazines they subscribed to, what websites they visited, to build up a profile on those 250 million Americans. Standard stuff, lots of people doing it. You may have also heard about something called psychographics. Did anyone here ever complete, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, one of those online personality questionnaires, those quizzes? Yeah, because everyone, they were like, find out whether you're neurotic or not, find out what sort of personality. And because we are all such narcissists, we all had to fill these bloody things out. What many of us didn't realise is what we were in fact filling out was a standardised ocean survey designed by psychologists, been around for several years, which asks you between 50 and 100 questions to elicit your precise personality on something known as an ocean score. And ocean stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And all of us, each of us here, has of course a completely unique personality, but we all lie somewhere on each of those 5 personality domains. So think for a second about where you might be. Now what Cambridge Analytica was doing, or through a secondary company called GSR, was to correlate the answers of your ocean survey with your Facebook likes to try to work out the patterns, the correlation between the two. And once they built up a good enough model, they could determine people's ocean scores based only on their Facebook likes. So maybe a few 100,000 people filled in this survey, but then with that data they could make a personality prediction for all 250 million Americans. The idea being that if you are I know Eric, for example, I know he's a very neurotic young man, so he's going to get an advert that with that knowledge we can target him with an advert that plays to the fact he's fearful about guns or whatever, he's going to get an advert for that. You over here, sir, I know you're a very agreeable person, I've seen your personality score, you're going to get one that's way more uplifting. And each of us will receive a completely different advert based on our unique personality drivers, what really motivates us. That's what they tried to do. The problem is, at the moment, there is no evidence that they actually used that in the Trump campaign. And there's no evidence that any of it actually works anyway. So I don't think they did that. I don't think it was important. What was important was a far simpler set of techniques. They took their 250 million data points, 5,000 data points on 250 million Americans, took them over to the US, sat down with the Republican Party data analysts, cross-referenced their data sets against something known as voter vault, which is the Republican Party's enormous, decades-long data sets of our voters, and tried to identify what they called as persuadables. The people that they thought were on the fence, the people that voted for Reagan but not for George W. Bush, the people that they thought could be persuaded to vote for Donald Trump. They found 13.5 million of those people. They then, with Cambridge Analytica's data set, worked out what motivated them, what they cared about, what they were interested with, and found that they believed, anyway, Cambridge Analytica, that there were just about enough persuadables in especially 3 key swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, to be able to swing the election. Everyone else said it was impossible. They thought the data said it was doable. And they relentlessly targeted those persuadable voters in those 3 swing states especially, TV adverts as well as Facebook adverts. And when the election results came out, Donald Trump won each of those swing states by less than 1 percentage point. He used Facebook way better than Hillary Clinton did. He won, I think he won Wisconsin by 22,000 votes. Now, so I think they were really important. But I think the key thing here is they were doing stuff that most political parties are doing in the US or elsewhere. It's not magic. This, I think, is, in a sense, more worrying. It's more worrying because it's become so normal. There are dozens of companies doing exactly the same. The question I think we should be considering now is not whether an election was stolen, not whether I mean, you can also, of course, worry about that. But what is this doing to how elections are won and lost? If someone had told me in 1997, when it was the first time I could vote, that in 20 years' time, elections will be fought over personalised data sets from thousands of different data points collected from all sorts of different places, designed to create a model about what you care about and then target you with an advert through a free social media platform called Facebook. I'm telling you, in 1997, that sounded like madness. I want you to consider what might things be like in 20 years from now on the current trajectory. Forget about today. What happens when our Fitbits, our baby monitors, our TVs, our smart fridges, everything in our smart home is all connected up to the great Internet of Things and is all collecting data about us? Where's that? Does anyone believe that a politician would not use your fridge data if they thought it might give them a chance of targeting you with a slightly better message? I'm telling you. You're going to open your smart fridge and Donald Trump's going to pop up just as you're going to get, because you're slightly hungry, and we know that you're hungry, and we know that when you're hungry you're angry, and we know that when you're angry you're more likely to be open to a message from a candidate that's tough on law and order. You open your fridge at 5:30 and up pops a hologram of Donald Trump. Slightly more likely for you to be open to that message than you would have been 1 hour ago. That sounds ludicrous. It doesn't sound as ludicrous as it would have sounded in 1997 if someone had told me what is happening today. So think about that. And rather than worry about a single election, imagine what this is doing to elections in general. One of the reasons I think that elections have become so contested, so bitter, so divisive, and people questioning the results is because they believe that the other side has cheated, because they don't believe that the regulators are on top of things. And if the vote had gone the other way, whether it was Brexit or whether it was Hillary Clinton winning, the other side would have said exactly the same. Donald Trump supporters would have said that Hillary Clinton was using personal data to target voters and we don't know what she was saying. Both sides are going to use this argument because both sides don't believe that the regulators are checking it. You know, during the European Union referendum, some of the Leave campaigners were doing targeted adverts on Facebook telling people that the European Union is trying to stop British people from drinking cups of tea. What's going on? No wonder the result was 52-48. So this is one problem. This is that the results become contested because the regulators can't stay on top of it. It also, I think, slowly turns elections increasingly into a data science. Who's got the best data sets? Who can do the best data analysis? Who can find the vulnerable emotional touch points that's most likely to sway somebody? Not about a big public argument where everyone gets to see what everyone else is seeing and we thrash out the issues of the day, but personalised, targeted messages. What happens, for example, when, in a decade's time, and I guarantee this is happening because you only need to look at ad tech to know, each person receives a completely unique message to them and them alone. How do you hold a politician to account that sends a million messages to a million different people, a million different messages to a million different people? And does this, in the end, even change the sort of politician that will be successful? Is the politician that's most liable, most likely, most talented at being non-committal and vague, so that an automated, generated machine is able to produce any kind of nonsense coming out of their mouth using an automated system that's targeted to that person? Is that not going to become the sort of candidate? I mean, every single politician, in some senses, is a reflection of the technologies through which they reach people. So this is the problem. It's not just about one election, it's about how elections are changing generally. And I see this as a kind of a metaphor really for the entire way we do politics today. In a very simple sort of way of describing it, is that we have a very old set of institutions, an old set of norms, an old set of laws, regulations that were designed for a very different world. Suddenly we have this brand new way of doing politics, and the two things don't work very well together. And many of the problems we see are a reflection of that tension. There's all sorts of other things beyond elections, but this is an example I sometimes give, which is, I don't know whether any of you, there's a few of you in here that's old enough to remember when we used to get our photographs developed at Boots. I can see some here, Nods of remembrance when we used to have to go on a holiday and then we'd take our 25 photos with our Kodak camera and we'd bring them back and we paid $5.99 to get these 25 rubbish photos back from Boots. And there was no way of, I mean, they were all overexposed, they were underexposed, they were terrible, and you had no way of changing them. Our whole lives as citizens is still essentially like going to Boots. That's how politics still works. Our lives as consumers is now Instagram. It's instant, it's changeable, it's free, we can send it to anyone, we can redo it, we can edit it, we can filter it, whatever we want. The two things just don't work very well together anymore. And so our great job, yes, of course, there's a lot of problems with how technology incentives are structured, but partly it's on democracy to upgrade, to change, to think about what it needs to do to still stay in touch with how people live their lives as consumers, because you cannot have a system of government that is so wildly out of sync with how people live their everyday lives. And this isn't to say we should rush headlong into some god-awful direct democracy. It's how do we improve the system that we have carefully, thoughtfully, keeping the good bits and discarding the bad bits. And there's no good just moaning and whinging about Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. I mean, it's fun to moan about those people too. But this is something that's much bigger than that. It's about an incompatibility problem between our norms, our rules, our regulations, and how our lives are lived. So that's one thing as citizens we have to, yes, lobby for and change the way things work. Ironically enough, when it comes to Cambridge Analytica, I think this is the easiest thing to solve. I really don't think it's so difficult to demand, as the Electoral Commission is now demanding, and the Information Commission's office is now demanding, that every single online advert that every political party ever uses has to be published, and in real time, and with who has been targeted by those adverts. Yeah, it's going to be a really long and boring Excel spreadsheet, but someone's going to go through it, and someone's going to make sure that people stay honest with it. We can fix that problem. There are other ones that are a lot harder than this, ironically enough, because everyone talks about Cambridge Analytica, but I think that's the easy bit. But a final word, because this is also about digital citizens, a final word. Am I doing okay? Have I got time for a final word? Final word. Final word. We citizens have to also understand that we are in some ways culpable. We are in some ways responsible for this state of affairs. It's our clicks, our shares, our swipes, our willingness to trade almost everything for convenience that has got us where we are today. We are feeding all of these systems. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to give up Google because you said, oh, Google's too big. It's a monopoly. I'm really worried about what it's going to, it's now the biggest lobbyist in Washington. I'm really worried about its size. I'm not going to use Google today. And then literally 5 minutes later, after using another search engine, you're back on Google because it's so much better. Nothing's going to change if that's what we do, because these systems only improve if other people use them. And if we only ever use the ones that are most convenient and easiest for us, and we trade everything, our privacy and everything else for convenience, then nothing will change. So my final word for you is to appreciate and understand your own complicity in all of this. Me too, I'm as bad as anybody else. I'm not lecturing at you. Technically I am, but I am saying it back to myself to motivate myself to do this, is to therefore at least be conscious that the choices we make with our clicks and our swipes and our data sharing, they matter. And the ones we make now, especially in how things are changing, matter more than ever. And so with that, thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand over to the panel.
Thank you, Jamie. Next up, we have a panel session which will be moderated by Casey Lister, who is Head of Tech and Digital at Ministry of Communications. That's fine.
Great. So I will start off with a brief introduction to myself. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I was happy to hear the shout out in Jamie's speech, although we did better in the midterms. So at least I have something to be proud of. I have a background in political campaigning, which is one of the reasons why I'm up here today, a small role in the Obama re-election campaign. Ended up in the UK. I specialize in tech policy and digital strategy. So I'm a consultant, also kind of got a shout out, but not for Cambridge Analytica at least. And I'm pleased to introduce my panel. I'm going to start off with Arik, who you work for WebRoots Democracy. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, so WebRoots Democracy is a think tank focused on technology and democracy. And two particular, so I started this in 2014. Two areas in particular we focus on are the potential of remote online voting elections. Another area is regulating social media platforms. And in particular, the objective of that part of research is to basically design very radical proposals for regulation, to try and start a conversation in that sense.
Thanks. Sabina is our another speaker. She's a policy advisor at the European Parliament, and I understand you're also doing a PhD at the same time on an area related to the digital economy. What's that about?
Yes. Hi, so I'm Sabina. Indeed, I've been working in the European Parliament for the last 8+ years. So for 2 mandates, third one coming up next year. And I do a PhD in King's College London on artificial intelligence and US foreign policy decision.
Very interesting. And lastly, we have Tejal, who is the UK Director of Change.org. I'm particularly interested in knowing what you're most excited about that's happening on the Change platform right now.
So we're a petition platform, and we've got 17 million users in the UK, which is 1 in 4 of the population, and we're open. So we're an open platform, so regardless of your political beliefs, you can start petitions on there. So we see stuff on either side of the spectrum. And I've just come from an event in Parliament about Brexit, where I was talking about the fact that, we're hammered by Brexit every single day. I can't breathe without hearing something about Brexit, but nobody's really asking the public about what they want with this deal. So we've been asked a really very kind of abstract top-line question, which is, do you want to leave or remain? But actually, the real policies that are going to affect our lives, no one's asking the public. So we've seen some incredible mobilisation and people using our platform to demand to be heard. And so we've got a petition at the moment, which is the biggest petition we've had on our platform this year in the UK, calling for a final say, a vote on the final deal. And it's got over 1 million signatures. And I'm seeing the tide turning on this demand for the public to be heard around Brexit. So that's pretty exciting.
So our panel is centered around politics being hacked. So if we can throw it out just a little bit of discussion from the panel about defining the issue. So what is actually happening? Marie, if I can start with you from your research. How are our politics being hacked? What's going on?
Yeah, so I'll say, so one thing I really do is advocate for the introduction of online voting. It's possibly the worst time to do so when you look at what's happening in America and elsewhere across Western democracies, where you're seeing states essentially using the internet and trying to interfere with elections in other countries discreetly, not always successfully. Like Jamie was saying, a lot of these things don't necessarily have much impact on any election, but it's the fact that they're trying and looking ahead in 20 years, what will that actually look like? Will it actually become quite successful? Will we actually have presidents elected because of interference by Russia, or referendums in this country swung because of the actions of other countries? In particular with America, because that's, I think, where a lot of this conversation is actually centered around, less so here in the UK. You have the issue there with electronic voting machines. So unlike in this country where we have paper-based elections, pretty much throughout the whole of the UK, apart from Scotland, where we have some e-counting. In America, different states have different systems, but you basically you have software there or hardware that's contracts have been signed for about 10 years ago and are quite vulnerable. And therefore there's quite a risk and a lot of conversation around whether you're going to see foreign states intervene in those. But the other main issue, I think, is that because the internet is quite a black box, and technology generally is quite a black box, even accusations of interference can undermine trust in democracy and can make it very easy to make accusations that elections are being tampered with. And one example I always use is if you look at the Brexit referendum and say it went the other way, 52-48 for Remain, and let's say this election was done online, all it would take is Nigel Farage to make an accusation that it was hacked for people to then distrust the results because the margin is so small. It kind of puts every vote into question. So, and I guess what the fourth bit is doing as well, to create this global democratic institution, you're going to have to look at things like online voting, because if you look at things like what you're going to do, make an embassy in every country, that's going to be very inefficient and completely undoable. And you're going to have to think about these issues now, because in the future, say it becomes a very successful organisation, institution, people are going to want to start interfering with it.
Now, I'll completely support your call for online voting. As an American citizen, it's an extremely archaic process to vote from overseas, and where I'm from is a very, very small town, so we have a joke that dead people still vote there. So this issue of elections being hacked is, maybe there's a bigger issue now, but it's not a new problem, it's just a different problem. We can fix that with cybersecurity, we can fix that with other things, but I appreciate the trust in the system actually being the key thing there. Sabina, sort of looking into the future then, about the issues that we're likely to face in the coming years. What about the European elections that are coming up?
So yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that Jamie mentioned and Tariq here will kind of play out next year in May when we have the European Parliament elections, unfortunately without Britain at that point. We've luckily had enough time since the US election and since the Brexit referendum to kind of try to figure out a bit of what's going on around fake news and how to protect elections, in terms of cybersecurity, but also the GDPR has come into force. So it's a lot of different measures that have been put in place to try to protect the upcoming elections. Of course, this is not the responsibility of the EU. It's each member state is organizing elections on their own. So it would very much vary in terms of implementation from east to west, from north to south in the EU, as it always does. So we may see different different levels of implementation of EU regulation by mid next year. What I'd like to touch upon is something that Eric mentioned in terms of, this Russian interference or, foreign interference in elections actually having an impact or not. And I'd like to share a story that's very recent that was published by the EU Disinfo Lab, which is a body sponsored by the European Commission that's dealing with fake news for elections. And I hugely recommend it if you're interested in the topic. They have a really good up-to-date newsletter. And one of the recent stories is about Spain signing an agreement with Russia in exchange for Russia stopping all this Catalonia stuff going on in Spain. They would support them on the sanctions front in the EU Council, which is like completely Cold War stuff to me. So it's insane. So I think it does have an impact. I think it has more of an impact that we currently know. I think a lot of the stuff from 2016 is still to come out, still figuring out what went on there. The micro-targeting in the Brexit referendum as well was completely crazy. I was looking at a case study specifically in Cambridgeshire where so there is a big Polish community in Peterborough, and they're targeting communities around at neighborhood level with fake news about Polish men robbing shops or whatever. You wouldn't necessarily make the connection of whether that's true or not, but you'd make the connection because you knew that's a Polish community. So, all that stuff going on, I think it does have an impact. I think beyond foreign interference and micro-targeting, it's also a kind of domestic problem. Of course, we have forces within our societies that are very happily using the tools to kind of swing the debates to the extremes. And one idea that I'd like to throw out there is, I live in Belgium, I work in Brussels, and Belgium is the only EU member state that has obligatory voting. They always have 90+% participation in all the votes, because otherwise you get a fine. So what happened there, the reasoning behind that when they implemented the system was to never allow extremes to get to power. Because when you have everyone voting, you can never have either the far left or the far right reaching government positions. And, well, at least from that point of view, I wouldn't praise the Belgian government for anything else, but at least from that point of view, it's kind of, it's working. So I think that's an interesting discussion to have. Online voting, but also kind of maybe obligatory voting.
Mandatory online voting. So, Kajal, around that petition about Brexit, what is it that people are worried about? Are they concerned with the issues that we've brought up and that Jamie's brought up already here today?
Yeah, I would just take a step back for a second. So I think that Change.org is a tech company. Our head office in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. And one of the things that is really striking to me is that these big tech companies like Facebook, they were never designed to be civic participation platforms. They were designed to be, helping friends to talk to each other. And that's, Mark Zuckerberg said he wanted to create a better world. But actually what ends up happening is that these companies all created better targeting. And so, and better ways of optimizing and trying to increase the chances of you using these platforms. And growth, so, speaking from Change.org as well, and just seeing the tech industry, growth is the #1 strategy for these organizations. And so when you're aiming for growth, you're trying to keep people addicted to the platform. And it leads to polarization, it leads to misinformation, and then it leads to corruption during elections. But just, I want to also make the point that this was never intended from these, as much as these silicon bros are, kind of annoying, I don't think that they ever set out to, they never expected these consequences. And actually, when you are building a platform for civic participation, you can tweak the algorithms and you can tweak the design to bring people together, not pull them apart. So some of the things that we've been doing and that I think Facebook has actually started testing out is giving users the ability to kind of vote on content, whether they trust it. So how much do you trust this third party? And so you kind of create these peer trust networks. And then, if something's flagged a lot, so one of the things that we do is if something's flagged a lot for misinformation, we've got a tiny team in the UK okay, there's 6 of us. But then I will then liaise with our policy team to go, okay, is this factually correct or incorrect? We have to do the research. You can't just have robots doing this stuff because often there's so much nuance involved. And that's another thing. So, the solutions aren't as easy as just creating better AI. People have to be involved. But I would also just like to say that, and actually what Jamie was saying, I really massively agree that it's about us and it's about our, what do we want the future to look like? I was talking to my friend earlier, who's at the back, and we were talking about the fact that it feels like with tech, it's very much like climate change was about 5-10 years ago. No one's really, the public, you can't motivate the public about it. And I don't know what it's going to take. It wasn't Cambridge Analytica, because as much as the media are hammering that story, but the public, Alvin started an incredible campaign on our site called Talk to Us Mark to try and pull Facebook to account and have them speak in front of Parliament. He's just like, no thanks. And, so our Parliament just still sat there, but the public aren't going bananas for it. And so I don't know what it's going to take for people to really realise that this is serious and this is bigger than they think. Has anyone seen, just recently, their friends sharing this ridiculous Q initiative, this Q currency? Like, so everyone thinks that there's if they sign up to this, it's like a pyramid scheme. So if they sign up to this thing called Q, that maybe they're going to make loads of money. And they're just willingly, they've got no idea who this company is, and they're willingly just giving their data. And then on the flip side of it, the media is talking about how Facebook's taking your data and using it for whatever purposes. So, people still don't get it. And I think, there's a couple of things that I think need to happen. One is, like Jamie says, I think politicians need to be brought into the 21st century. It's so frustrating to me that the amount of MPs I speak to have got no idea what drives tech companies, how they make their money, anything about venture capitalism. They need to know this stuff. It's so important. And then the other thing I think is that we need digital literacy for the public. I think this stuff needs to be educated in school so that people really understand, because it's a reality and we're not going to go backwards now. It's only going to get more and more extreme.
Yeah, and looking forward to solutions. Then we'll stay on that. It sounds like I was going to ask what more agency people needed. What do they need to be empowered with to be able to make the change that we need to see or demand that change from our regulators or the people who are making our laws? Is there something that people need, or is it more than education? How can we start to think about giving power back?
I think it's about education, because I think that most people don't understand any of the stuff that when we talk about tech and that people are talking about Cambridge Analytica and talking about targeting, people don't understand. And so I think that's about education. I think so. It starts with that. You've got kids coding in schools, but are we actually teaching them about protecting their data and actually what happens to their data? Maybe if we mobilise young people, that's where it's actually going to start. That's where we're going to actually see the knock-on impact.
Sabina, talking about how you start to change regulation and policy. Is it on the EU level? Is it on the member state level? Is it an international level? To be future-facing, where do we need to be?
I think the discussion, pretty much ever since 2016, has moved to an international level. We've had discussions about election protection, election integrity, with a bunch of stakeholders at all kinds of level, whether it's national level, EU level, but also international level under the UN framework and so on. So it's even within NATO for that matter, because it is a matter of kind of protecting the elections when it comes to foreign interference specifically. So I think it is like any kind of debate on tech. I think it needs to happen at the highest possible level, including the widest possible stakeholder range that you can get, whether it's, you talk about all the range of NGOs working on these issues, but like the whole industry bringing together regulators. And I think, if you can bring it under the UN, which will never be able to probably badly be the framework. But I think for the time being, you'll have to have the like-minded countries working together. And it will have to be a kind of Western-focused coalition of work on that.
Can I just add to that? So I actually think that the EU other potential hear risks in all of this. And I think that they're the only ones really putting the tech companies to account. During the Brexit, the EU referendum, Steve Hilton, who's big in Silicon Valley, and he came back to the UK because he's former number 10 advisor to campaign aggressively for Brexit because he knew that the EU were really the only people the only body out there that were willing to put Silicon Valley, hold them to account. And I think as much as Nick Clegg recently got hired by Facebook, and it was lots of jokes were made about it, but I actually think that shows that Facebook is realising, because Nick Clegg is the biggest advocate of the EU, and he knows what he's talking about, and I think that they brought him in for that reason. I think they're starting to take it seriously.
Definitely. Eric, to go to you, what's our best chance to be able to catch up quickly? Because that's what we've been hearing over and over again.
Yeah, so I mentioned that we did this, we're doing a project on regulating social media, and our first report came out a few weeks ago, which was looking at online abuse in political debate. And the objective of our project is basically to put forward really radical ideas, and I consider myself to be like a sort of leftist interventionist person in a libertarian world, right? So the kind of, I agree with all the we need a global institution. That is really where ultimately it does need to end up. As we need a similar sort of Paris-style climate change movement for tech policy, but that could take decades, right? We're talking, even looking at the climate change, we're comfortable that there's got lots of hiccups in that. And can we afford to wait that long, or is there stuff that we could do now? And we put forward 11 recommendations around online abuse. Some of them are kind of, I guess, less interesting. Things like mandatory transparency reports from social media platforms, the creation of a new regulator for tech companies. The most radical ones we have, however, were my favourite one, which was to implement a new tax on social media platforms, not based on revenue or profit, but based on the number of users that each of these companies has. So, for example, if you're Facebook, we call it the civil internet tax. If this rate was set at £1 and you have 30 million users in the UK, you pay £30 a year. And it's very difficult to avoid that, because you either do or don't have those number of users in the UK. And what you can then do is reinvest that money, which doesn't really exist, especially in a austerity Britain, into initiatives like digital literacy, into initiatives like anti-discrimination. And the most radical one we had in there, which we've received the most hate for, I'd say, is an idea to implement as a final sanction in social media platforms a 3-day nationwide suspension of that platform. Super radical, obviously lots of comparisons to like North Korea and China, which does overshadow the idea. However, they have elections in North Korea, doesn't mean it's a bad thing, just because the way that they do it is very messed up. And if you look at a normal company in the UK, so let's say you're a takeaway and you completely disregard health and safety standards, you don't have a blank check to continue operating. It's the same with any other company. If you fail to hand in your accounts, that company's house will get shut down. However, when we look at the internet, we seem to step back and say, well, we can't go there, we have to give them a blank check to operate. We can only work around the edges and change things here and there. And really, I think we need to be a lot bolder and a lot more radical if you really have any sort of chance of reining in these companies.
There's definitely a libertarian strain that comes from Silicon Valley. I do really like your idea for the revised tech tax. As a lot of us are probably aware, there was the tech tax floated in the budget for a ridiculously low sum of money that they should be able to raise from those kind of tech platforms. But now I'm going to throw it open to the audience. I'll take maybe a couple questions if you can keep them, grab one of those, if you can keep them short, and a direct question would be preferable, so hands. And including for Jamie, I can try to get him to answer anything, right? Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Alfie. I'm from the Common Sense Network. We provide news which tackles echo chamber culture by bringing different ideologies together in a constructive, structured way. My question was for Arik on the topic that we were just discussing. I really like the innovative feature of this tech tax idea, but I just wanted to know what are the actual logistics of forcing something like that through, who has to agree, and how does Facebook agree? Thank you.
So the main issue, and the main issue with all of these kind of regulations, I would say, is how you define each company. So we didn't try to actually do this in our report, but how do you define a social media platform? Is it just Facebook and Twitter? Are there other ones? What else comes into Wikipedia? A social media platform, because people can talk to each other on there. So that's one big issue, I would say. In terms of how you'd actually do it, I mean, it relates to this transparency reports idea. I mean, like with any taxation, or most taxation, you self-report figures. So if you're self-employed, you self-report your figures to HMRC. You could have a similar sort of thing where a social media platform self-report however many users they have in the UK. Often they actually publish these anyway in their advertising offerings, so it would be relatively easy to verify. And the other problem is how do you then enforce the payment of that taxation if they don't do it? Again, this is kind of looking at those other options like the most extreme one, which is the actual suspension of platforms. You don't really have any leverage to shut down platforms if they disregard the rules.
Great, other questions? See one over there?
Hi, my name is Fumi Adebayo. I'm an opinion columnist for the Africa Report and also a trader and credit analyst. I guess it's two things which I've noticed as a common theme, but also in this panel discussion. As someone of African descent, I'm a bit wary of international organizations like the UN, IMF, World Bank, etc. For many reasons, because they tend to not take into account the cultural nuances of situations. What's right or wrong is a moral question, and that's usually informed by your cultural rearing. And there's always a lack of context around many of these things, and I think that's quite lacking. But secondly, I think I don't think there's a problem necessarily with being able to persuade people about something. I mean, that's what politics is fundamentally about. The problem, sometimes it feels a bit, it doesn't feel very clear if the problem is if they're using lies, things that are just not facts, or if the problem is that they've been able to change or influence people's minds, because I don't think that the latter is necessarily a problem. So I just wanted some more clarity on that from the panel more generally.
Great, so this is a very much like fake news centered question, because we're talking about disinformation and misinformation and teasing those things apart from persuasion. And also the question, if everyone's thinking about it and whoever wants to take it, is centered around international norms, that we haven't perhaps reached a stage where we have agreed on those things for tech policy and tech platforms. So how can then we go ahead and start regulating them? You've been put on the spot, yeah.
Okay, I'll say a couple of quick things about it. One of the things that wasn't reported either by us at the BBC or by the Observer is just how much Cambridge Analytica's original techniques were developed in developing world countries. I mean, Kenya, Nigeria, Caribbean, India, and there's a kind of a network of companies operating in those countries where the data restriction rules are much looser, and they're getting away with murder. And I don't know exactly, I mean, maybe we do need some kind of international data body that can really focus in on that, because when you look at some of the techniques, frankly, that were employed in those countries, they're way worse than anything that was done in the US. And I hope this is a story that in the next 6-12 months gets a bit more prominence, because it's pretty outrageous. I mean, it hasn't really been talked about. It's like being tested there and then employed here. And it's, anyway, that's a wider issue, but I suppose what I'm saying is that I accept your concerns totally about these international bodies, but you do have a group of international network companies that are going around across these different countries doing this stuff with impunity. So we need to get on top of that somehow. I suppose I agree with you about persuasion. Obviously, politics is persuasion, and adverts have always been used, TV has always been used, and politicians have always been liars and exaggerators and so on. I guess the problem is that it's being manifested in a different way now that is maybe slightly harder to see. I guess it's partly about how you address an age-old problem with these new technologies, rather than throwing up your hands and saying, we've always had this problem, we're always going to have it. Just because it was terrible before doesn't mean we can accept it. It's terrible now, and it's always going to be terrible. I think the issue that I'm worried about is where persuasion starts to tip into manipulation. So people are being targeted with things that they really don't even understand. I mean, it's about emotional triggers, personality types, certain neuroses. People who are suffering from depression getting targeted at the lowest point with a particular message to play on that weakness at that point in time. These are things that I don't think were possible at kind of industrial level a decade ago, but that are now, which is why we do need, I think, to sort of new ways of trying to stay on top of it.
I think what the biggest lie that got us to leave was the £350 million that was on the bus. It wasn't in social media. And I think that, there's one issue about the fact that should people be allowed to make claims in an election and then, not commit to, not keep them. But I think for me, it's the bigger issue is the principle. And it's the fact that you had this bunch of very privileged people who set up these companies and didn't realise how big they were going to get, and they permeated our entire lives. And government should be holding them to account. They shouldn't get a free ride. They're in society. They are impacting our democracies, and so they should be regulated. And at the moment, they're not.
We'll take one more question. Let's see.
Mike, also from the Common Sense Network. Just a quick question, mainly to the online platforms like on the stage. One thing we try and do essentially is kind of put a holistic approach to solving issues. So, for instance, one thing we're very big on is this notion of echo chambers and how we get people out of them. So our work begins online, but then also we do kind of live events to get kind of young people, namely millennials, interacting on ideas. And I just thought, to what degree you thought addressing these issues has to encompass a kind of live, human-centered kind of approach? What do you just think? So for instance, I have an issue or suspicion with kind of people retweeting and thinking that's campaigning. Or people kind of tap it and like and go in, yes, support the movement. I'm just wondering, do you think a lot of these issues you're speaking about are going to be solved kind of solely online? And essentially, what part does kind of live action, mobilizing, and galvanizing, what part does that play in kind of solving these social issues?
I saw 2 other hands, so let's quickly take those 2 other questions and then we'll answer them in the round.
Hi, Andrea. I would like to ask Jamie for one question. I love what you said at the beginning about booths, going to the booths for the pictures and getting back.
Terrible.
It's terrible, yeah, reflecting the politics. And last year, we were interviewing Jim Garrison, who was an advisor of Michael Gorbachev. And he said that the thing what the politics is lying this century is lying on disruptions. So I would like to say, what do you see? What will be 1 or 2 most disruptive things the politics or we as citizens will see in politics in maybe following years, based on your experience?
Okay. And over there.
So I was really interested by what the panel was saying about the influence that these groups have had on elections. My question is, if we know step 1 is that someone is interfering with our elections, and we know step 3 is we want to have fair elections, what's step 2? Do we rerun elections? What level of interference should we be doing something about? Once we've had an election and we know something has influenced it, what then? We don't seem to have policy implementation that says, we know that bad stuff happened online, so let's rehold it. Are we willing to bear that cost? At what level do we do it? This is something I'm particularly interested in for the European elections.
Okay, so to recap really quickly, we had, I'm forgetting already. Yeah, the human factor, if are the solutions all online, essentially, would be a good way of summing it up. The disturbances we're most likely to see, disruptions, that was directed to Jamie, and then what's our plan? So we get 350 million on the bus, and then what happens? What should happen? Yeah.
I'll start with your question. I really liked it because, you know, you probably all heard about Steve Bannon's new idea, new project for Europe. So he's created this far-right platform to basically counteract Soros and Open Society Foundation in Europe. And his idea is to go for the European elections. Nobody votes, perfect. We'll just rally our base and we'll get all these far-right people into the European Parliament. That's the plan. It may actually work. And it will work because of that. Because the social media is full of people actually supporting elections, confirming their voting, checking in 2 days before and then doing something else on vote day. So I think the bigger question there is grassroots kind of engagement and participation. And this is why I kind of brought up the idea of obligatory voting, actually, because as long as people stay at home when it matters, not much will change. So I think that's very important. Taking all that enthusiasm and energy that you see, you see around any kind of elections, whether national, in this case European level, in the US, if you can translate all that enthusiasm and energy into actually get out vote efforts on those important 4 days or whatever it is next year, I think that's where it will make a difference. And I'll touch upon the lady's question here. So yeah, there's step 1 and step 3, and step 2 is the biggest problem. The problem is we've been very reactive, mainly because we had no idea what's going on. So we had no idea what's going on with Russia until after the elections, after the US and after the Brexit referendum elections. Even now, we don't really know. I mean, yeah, we've heard about Sputnik News and Russia Today and a bit of the bot activity going on around there and how they. But the French elections were almost turned upside down 2 hours before closing. They have 24 hours before the election where you can't do campaign, where you can't talk about it. And it was, I don't know if you've heard about this Macron leak story, which was going to come out an hour before. And that's the French elections coming up significantly after 2016. And Macron had a kind of fake news intervention team for that because he knew that's a problem. So I think the reasoning for that is us being reactive, right? Facebook came the same thing. We kind of figured it out after it kind of happened, and then it's like, okay, what do we do about it? Let's bring Zuckerberg to kind of testify, in front of the European Parliament. He came. Well, we all know how that went. He went to Congress. We all know how that went. How do you regulate? Well, we do have a discussion on regulation. Jamie mentioned that. It's how you actually create a transparency and all of that that's kind of required now. So it's you want to do ads in Europe, political ads. You have to say who's behind them, who's paying for them. Do they work? Well, not really, because only last week we've heard that 100 people from, there's a spies report, 100 people just went on Facebook, said they're US senators, pushed through ads. So much for election integrity. So the solution is, I think, regulation to a certain extent. The solution is also awareness, and it's mixed the two. It's, kind of politicians having more knowledge, more awareness, better prepared staff to actually work for them and do the kind of regulation that we need. You also need very aware, very engaged citizens that are able to flag those issues, that are able to have those conversations and push those into the kind of political arena as well.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wary of rerunning elections because you're unleashing demons and you really won't be able to control. But clearly regulation's got to be much more real-time in the future. So I think we kind of put the others down to experience, figure out what we do from now. And I agree about the offline-online thing. I know that wasn't my question, but I totally agree. It's not all about online answers at all. Definitely not. In fact, most of the answers probably aren't to be found online. But one thing about echo chambers, I often think, I don't feel like we're stuck in echo chambers online. I feel like the problem is, certainly I feel this, is I'm surrounded by views I disagree with. but I just don't listen to them. I don't pay attention to them. I disregard them. I dismiss them. I impute malevolent motives to my opponents. And that's partly a kind of problem of how we engage with each other online. And partly, I think that is, we live in an age of distraction where we're constantly checking our bloody devices for reasons you've said. The market, the bottom line demands it. And I think that makes us less capable of engaging with difficult, grey area, complex ideas, which is one reason why the 350 million claim, which I agree was not on social media, works so well, because all of us can't concentrate anymore. The concentration level of the country has declined by about 50% in the last 10 years, which means we are persuadable by rubbish and nonsense. Well, yeah, exactly. Left wing, right wing, it's both sides are doing it. But the things that I think we'll really see, I mean, Donald Trump, in my mind, is the first social media politician who really understands the medium in the same way that John F. Kennedy was the first television president. But that won't be enough to wake us up. Snowden and Cambridge Analytica, like you say, hasn't been enough to wake us up. What makes government regulate things is when people die. And when the first either autonomous vehicle or smart home is hacked into and someone dies as a result of poor internet security or poor data use, there'll be an outcry and governments will regulate it. So unfortunately, I think it's actually going to take physical harm, deaths for governments to act, and sadly that is going to happen in the next couple of years. Related to that, the big challenge everyone is sort of coming to mind now is the dramatic improvement in, if we think fake news is bad at the moment, the dramatic improvement in fake video content. And the reason I think that's really important is because video is an emotional medium. Visual mediums are emotional in a way that text is not. So you can have fake text news, and people can be duped, some people aren't. But videos, I think, play to a different part of our brains. And I think this is going to be a huge issue, which is why media literacy, I think someone already said it, is the most important thing you can learn in school, bar none. And it has to include psychology, because even Google's algorithms are not as powerful as our own cognitive biases. We don't learn about that.
Thanks. I'll challenge you a little bit on the point about somebody needing to die, because people have already died based on fake news web stories. And I mean, in America, we don't regulate guns, and still taking there. So I wish there was more, or there's something else that would push it over the edge. But last question that I'm going to throw open to the panel, whoever wants to take it, is we've talked a lot about the negative influence of tech on politics. Does anyone have an example of a positive influence that tech has had on politics? And we'll end there.
Can I give a story? Because I do what, essentially we are using tech for good. So I want, and also just on people dying, let this be you should learn about this stuff, talk to your friends and mobilize. That's the only way we can really get change to happen, when it actually comes from the bottom up. So feel angry and then talk to people, bang on about it. So it's not just the minority who just seem really paranoid about all of this. And it works. When you mobilize, you are consumers. And when consumers get together and push a company, they make changes. So I've just got a really quick story. So there's this girl called Belinda who's a uni student. Her mum used the wheelchair, and her mum was visiting her in London for a weekend. And they were supposed to have this really lovely weekend travelling around London. Used Google Maps, and it just ended up being a horribly humiliating experience for the both of them, because every time they tried to get from A to B, they were sent on a route that just wasn't wheelchair friendly. So they'd get out of the station and they'd be met with a footbridge, and they'd have to go back. And I don't know if you know what it feels like to be a young person with your parent and your parent being humiliated. It's the worst feeling in the world. And so Belinda went home. They spent hours just wasting time, and Belinda was really angry that this, this app wasn't designed for people like her mum. And so she started a petition calling for Google Maps to be wheelchair accessible. The reason it isn't is that Silicon Valley is not diverse, and so people making these products are just one type of person. So that's another thing that needs to change. That the more you get diversity in these making these platforms, they're actually then thinking about the risks of the things that they're creating, because some of the people who are building the platform are actually people at risk. Anyway, Google ignored it, started getting thousands of signatures. New Statesman got really interested, started calling Google up for a response. Google ignored it. Then it got to about 200, 300,000 signatures because Belinda told her story, and that resonated with people. And I think that's how you kind of get away from people becoming really polarized, and you get these abstract debates and people feeling really isolated from each other. But if you tell stories, you can bring the people together. And then she started getting her assignments to start leaving reviews on Google Maps and just kind of like just really piling on the pressure. And then Google eventually invited her in for a meeting. And now they're rolling out accessible maps in Paris, London, New York. And that's just the beginning. So I think it is possible. And these companies, they listen to their consumers. So if you mobilize and you actually make them feel threatened, they'll start listening.
Great, thank you. Thanks to our panel. Turn over now.
Right, thank you to our panel. That was a great discussion. Right, we're going to have a little interlude. I think that we've just finished having lunch. People are a little sleepy, so we're going to get a little bit physical. Okay? Can you all stand up? It's all right, you don't need your phones, you won't need anything like that. I think first of all what we need to do is we need to limber up a little bit. So, big stretch. Need a bit of backing music. Right. Dog if you want to. Right, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a little game of visual data collection. Yes, because data has been the key theme, key word that's been going around for this whole summit. So I'm going to divide the room into two parts. So straight down the middle of this table, and I'm going to ask some questions. And I would like you to take a side. So there'll be one answer on that side, one answer on the other. Yeah? Keeping it very simple, but it means that you have to move. So you don't need your phones, you don't need your bags, you don't need anything. So, and this is, I just think it's quite interesting when visually collecting data. Stand up there, come down here, please. Unless you can fly, all of you down in the middle, come on. Chop, chop, quick, quick. You've got 5 minutes for this. Right. So the first question, do you prefer a city or the countryside? Go. City, countryside. Good. Okay, there is a spectrum. There is a spectrum. Right, oh, okay. City dwellers, more countryside, prefer the country. So most of you prefer the city with a bit more greenery, so Greenwich, yeah? Yes. Greenwich, yeah, definitely. Okay, next one. Tea or coffee? Neither. Oh, it can be decaf. What? No, that's not the option either. Water. This is really interesting. There's no kind of real one. Yeah, go on.
Left-handed or right-handed? Left here, right there. Left here, right there. Wow. If anyone's in the middle, you're ambidextrous, I see. Right. Oh, very few lefties, unsurprisingly. Okay. Okay. The next one is remain. Keep up on top. Right. The next one I want to do with you guys is. Hold on, I've got loads of Right. Only child or siblings? Not which you prefer, which you are. I wish my siblings weren't around. Wow, interesting. Okay, fine. Right. Next one. You've got one.
Okay. On topic. Who wants to own their data and who wants to control their data? Wait, what? Own and control.
All the control freaks going over to that side. I see what's happening. The neurotic.
Well,
We'll do a couple more and then we'll get back. The middle. If you are a morning person, go to my left. If you're a night person, go to my right. Morning person to my left, night person to my right. Okay. So everyone to my right is going for a drink afterwards. Wonderful. Right, and the final one, before we get to my cousin, if your glass is half empty or half full. Half empty or half full. Do you know what? I prefer the honesty of these people, I'll be honest. All of you are lying, no one's that positive. Very good.
Great. Okay, thank you for playing games. Are you all awake now? Yes? Good? Good? Great. So, we quickly take our seats. Alright, now everybody's going for the sugar. Yes, they're awake. Great. Okay, so now we're moving to the next section of the afternoon. We have a keynote speaker, Richard Lloyd, founder of You Us We and chairman of Resolver. Is he in? Yes, if you'd like to come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am not a Conservative backbench MP. I'm standing in for Lee Rowley, so it's a real opportunity for me to not be keynote speaker as Bill. So look, I want to talk a bit about the data market and the technology market, but from a consumer perspective. I was just listening to some of the comments about the power that consumers have to change the behaviour of companies. And I think, and I'm a half-full kind of person, I think there is a real strong argument here for assuming we can get over some of the big problems stopping consumers exercising their power in the market, for that to be a much quicker route to change than some of the regulatory or legal avenues that you've been talking about. Of course, big companies and big data isn't anything new. Banks, for example, insurance companies have been examining consumers' data to work out the price of your insurance or your loan for many years. The difference is speed. There's also a lot of companies and organisations now who are obviously using data or trying to use data for good, from the NHS here to smaller tech startups. But if we think about the market, the data market as it is now, with a very small number of companies dominating it, a small number of companies using their dominance to stifle competition, either to buy it up or to crowd it out. If you think about the accumulation of very, very large amounts of data, unprecedented, and the ability of companies to use that, to monetize that, to exploit it, for example, for advertising, then we are sailing into very different waters. This doesn't feel like the dominance of banking, the dominance in energy, and in other markets that have classically been seen to be so failing that governments have felt they've had to intervene. And I was thinking about this also just from the perspective of mixed markets or public services, actually. I was reading an email from my kids' school. They sent me a bulletin saying, well, first of all, click on Google to read the bulletin. Secondly, a lot of what they wanted to say was about how they're using Google for Schools, Google Classroom. And the school has just been awarded Apple Distinguished School status for its use of iPads. I mean, it is extraordinary. We used to see this with banks getting into the kids early and becoming part of their everyday lives in a way that makes them using their products in the future just absolutely normal. At the same time, by the way, that the school is warning of the dangers of excessive screen time, and I don't seem to have connected those two issues up. But consumer campaigns have been onto the issue of how companies are using data and technology to gather people's data for a long time. I've worked for a long time with campaigners and journalists who've been looking at smart TVs, harvesting data, toys, smart meters, and the like. But very often that was done from the perspective of privacy, not through the perspective of a broader set of consumer rights. And that's what I want us to think about a bit today. And it's urgent because with machine learning, your rights as a consumer can be so much more quickly trampled on. For example, it's very easy now to spot a vulnerable consumer, a consumer with mental health problems, and a bank could therefore, in theory, very quickly say to you, no, I'm not going to provide you with a product, an insurance company the same, an airline charge you more. Differential pricing as a result of the misuse of data is already happening. But we need to think about what consumers can actually do. And if you look at the research into how consumers engage with data and technology, you find, as in lots of other markets, in fact, pretty much every market, that consumers don't behave in a rational way. We all use rules of thumb. We all give priority to the here and now over the longer term. We are only vaguely aware of the consequences of giving away our data in return for something that looks free right now. And because of technology shifting so quickly, it's extremely hard for consumers to keep up with all of that. And in particular, for consumers, if you attempt to understand these issues, the complexity makes it even more unlikely that you're going to be engaged with it. There's a habit there that the more complex it looks, the more you will probably not engage with it. So there's a really big challenge here about how we help consumers to engage with this market of data and technology in a way that works for them, that gives them either the ownership, although I argue those are two sides of the same coin. About 5 years ago, I sat down with the then Consumer Minister here in the UK and senior people from all the major tech companies, all the big ones. And the discussion was about, knowing what we know about how consumers behave, how can we get meaningful consent at the point at which a consumer is buying something? We've all put your hands up if you've just recently ticked the box that says you've read the 19 pages of iTunes terms and conditions before you could download a song or a film. No one is putting their hand up, and that's exactly right. None of us do it. The conversation was, you big tech companies are making liars of consumers by getting us to tick those boxes, knowing extremely well, knowing actually through their own technology, that people are not reading those 19 pages of legalese. We know that. And the challenge to those firms was very simple. It was, how are you going to make, as in other markets, very complex contractual relationships meaningful and for consumers to be engaged with those? And the answer, very politely, from every single firm, every big tech company that was in the room, that everyone uses every day, was, sorry, we're just not going to do it. And I wasn't surprised by that, and I'm sure you were, but even when early on this was spotted by ministers, by governments that were starting to worry about the consequences of this, even in a narrow way, the answer was a very simple, no, we ain't doing it. So we've got to look at the limits of what's available through persuasion, through government action short of regulation. And we've also got to think carefully about what realistically we can expect consumers to do, knowing their behaviour and how people are, as I've described. And my argument is that what we need to do is to think about this not through a privacy perspective, although that's important, but through a broader consumer rights perspective. There are fundamental consumer rights recognised by the UN, kicked off by JFK in the 70s and written up into a set of consumer rights in 1980. But I think set out a framework for what we need to be aiming for internationally. Now, those include the following. It's the right to access essential goods and services, the right to safety, the right to information and education, although recognising the limits of that. Really importantly, it's a right to the protection of consumers' economic interests. One of the dysfunctions in the data and tech market at the moment is obviously that massive imbalance of power between the individual and the firm. You know, if you want to complain to Facebook about something, good luck. And if you want to complain to them or get redress, even better luck. There is a huge asymmetry, in part because people may not know that their rights have been breached. The UN Declaration has, therefore, a right to redress and the right to representation. So recognising that consumers need the tools to hold companies to account to get redress when things have gone wrong. And individuals, people, consumers need champions to stand up for them, knowing that you need expertise to engage with some of the world's largest companies. Now, obviously, in the UK, we've got a thing called the Consumer Rights Act, we've got a new Data Protection Act, but neither of those particularly well set out or describe consumer rights in that way. We come at these rights and the ability of consumers to enforce them in a very piecemeal way. And in particular, if you think about who's there to enforce those rights for you, you've got the Information Commissioner or you've got Trading Standards Departments in local authorities massively outgunned, hugely overwhelmed by the amount of times that people are having their data rights breached, where there is so many and such a changing grey area about the behaviour of tech companies. They're completely, and companies know this, big companies that may not have the individual interest purely at heart, are very aware of that. So enforcement is lacking, weak, extremely hard to do. Never mind getting consumers redress when their rights have been broken. So what I'm going to argue now is that one of the ways we need to give consumers power is by enabling them to get together to hold companies to account. What we're doing at Google US, and there's some of my brilliant colleagues sitting towards the back, lawyers, we're taking Google to court on behalf of 4.5 million people who had their data rights breached, collectively, meeting that cost by having such a large number. If you're one individual, you're not going to sue Google for their harvesting your data illegally from your iPhone. And we're using a medieval legal route to try to find a precedent in court that will allow consumers to club together to be represented by one of their own without all of them having to be in court together. There is no court that will accommodate the numbers of people we're talking about. And surprise, surprise, we've had a first opinion from a High Court judge, which is this shouldn't even be allowed because, in his words, although people's legal rights may have been breached, some people like that. He actually said some people like a surprise party. And our view is very simple. If your legal rights have been breached, you should have a remedy as an individual. And that is an argument I'm hoping we're going to continue to have in court in the coming weeks. And we'll keep you posted about that. But it's incredibly important if you recognise, as I've said, the limitations of what consumers can do individually, their understanding, their knowledge, even if well educated about what's happening with their data. In the heat of a moment of a transaction, they may well take a risk, and they certainly may well not know that their data is being exploited and misused. So we have to find, and I think this will probably require a change in the law in the UK and elsewhere, the means for consumers to act collectively in court if necessary to hold very large firms to account. Finally, how do we get there? And I know you've been talking about this a lot today. How do we give individuals more power other than through the court? Well, we can't rely on governments or regulators to make the changes that we want in the short run. It's just not going to happen. Not least because you can see the relationship between the centre of government and very large tech companies is so close, if not the same at times. And I think if you look at, for example, the demands that Amazon have been putting on cities in the US for the beauty competition for where they might go with their head office, you can see that the power of those businesses is extracting more and more from governments, from cities, from regulators. They are not going to give that power up easily. I think instead what we need to do is recognise the limits of that and work with businesses that do get that there's a long-term sustainability argument about behaving ethically. It's not winning everyone all the time, but it's working out where we can get change to happen, who's got the power to make changes, who can most quickly affect people's lives, recognising that governments are going to be so slow, never mind on an international arena. Then we need to get like-minded organisations together. I mean, I worked in the 1990s on the campaign to ban landmines, and it was a tech campaign. We used email. It was, at the time, felt very revolutionary. We were talking to people all over the world about a single campaign objective, sharing messages, getting case studies and research shared by email. It was great. And what I heard earlier on is about the different tools that we have available, Tech for Good, giving people power together. Recognising, though, that I think people have started discounting the impact of 100,000 signatures on a e-petition. The bar is getting higher and higher and higher. But in the centre of government, we now need to see a very big number of people involved to sit up and take notice. And then finally, as I've said, I think we need to creatively look at all the other avenues to give groups of people, consumers, more power in the face of a dysfunctional tech and data market. I know I wouldn't argue this, but I think it's incredibly important that we can enforce our own rights in the court. I think it's incredibly important that we can hold regulators to account, force them, if necessary, to take action against companies that have broken the law. But I think my message overall today is, and this is why I'm so pleased about United Citizens getting launched, is that this is a market that's been done before. These kinds of dysfunctionalities, these problems have been there before in lots of other markets. It's possible to organise. We need the platform to do it, and we need the huge numbers of people who are now waking up to this to back it, to make the change happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, especially for fighting the good fight. I think everyone in the room here really wishes you the best of luck in taking on Google. So, no, I mean that genuinely. That sounds sarcastic, but I do genuinely want to do that's my voice. Right. So we do have a panel discussion now. What I'd like to do is call on stage the moderator. He is the Global Finance and Economics Editor of Quartz. It's Jason Carey. Hi everyone. Yeah, come on up. Thank you very much. I'm Jason. I'm from Quartz, and I will introduce my panel shortly. We, if you don't know, Quartz is an online business news site. We actually launched with one of our taglines probably a few years ago was about covering the new global economy. And what we're here to talk about now is about the data-driven economy. The new global economy is really based on data. Things about data is the new oil, it's the most precious resource, it's renewable in many ways, and so that's kind of exciting. But as we've been talking about throughout the day, here it can be misused. There's a lot of open questions about the ownership of it. And so, we're going to maybe shift to talk, instead of talking about the data-driven economy, we're going to talk about the economy of data, about what works, what doesn't, what can we do to
rein in companies to change incentives to get people to take more ownership of their data. And I have an excellent panel with me. Carl Miller is co-founder and research director at Demos, the think tank. He's, but more important perhaps, he's the author of a book out this year called Death of the Gods, the New Global Power Grab. So pretty strong stuff there. He described himself as poking into the scary, hidden, weird, and important parts of the digital age to understand how all our lives are changing. He's here to tell us about it, so that's pretty exciting. Sophia Adams-Baki is Director of Legal and Regulatory Policy at the Law Society. She leads their legal and regulatory policy team oversight for development across the whole justice system. So she had a lot to say about managing and oversight and regulating data. So that'd be great. And then Aaron Hussain is Senior Advocacy Manager at Open Contracting Partnership, which exists to promote the power of open data to save governments money and time, deliver better goods and services, and help companies interface with government when it comes to contracting and spending and all that kind of stuff. So she can come at it from the kind of small business angle because they produce lots of data and they are also in many ways frenemies, let's say, of the big tech companies and also of governments who want to do it. So talking about the economy of data here, it could be a short discussion because we have GDPR now, so that's all sorted, right? Like we know we own our data and we have to give permission for that, and that's it. So, Sophia, why are we here?
It's done, right? That's what they say. So let's just be really clear. GDPR has a really valuable role to play, and it's much relied by people. So it's complicated to really assign real power to consumers and users of their data, but it's better than what we had before. And interestingly, what it seeks to do is try to set some sort of benchmark at the regional block level. And maybe we'll get on to sort of international trade flows, which actually I think there's something really important about standards that are set at a European level, Brexit or no Brexit, so that we can actually seek to set a standard or at least compete with the major power blocks in China and the US. So GDPR has a place and a role in this, but does it answer all the questions? No, not at all. Does it answer the question around data ownership that we will talk about? It's really interesting that little split in the break. How many of you want data ownership and how many of you want data control? Evenly split, probably not so much in the middle, right? Probably describes a whole range of complexities. Those sorts of issues are not covered by GDPR, and neither are the ethics that underpins it. So.
What does data ownership mean to you? You looked at the big tech companies and took a pretty critical view of how they use and sometimes abuse our data. What does GDPR help? Does regulation more broadly? Let's just talk about GDPR. It's the state of play.
Can I begin by telling a quick story, which only kind of marginally answers the question, but I think is quite interesting.
Let's do it.
It's a story which is kind of good because it lets me talk about my book in the first sentence of it. So I was going out, I had to do it sooner or later. I was going out trying to understand power shifting around the world. And one of the places that I thought was most relevant to this was that I was desperate to see the algorithm. We always hear in the press about the algorithm, how algorithms are controlling everything. My God, the algorithms are everywhere. Well, I actually really wanted to actually come face to face with the algorithm. It took a lot of convincing, and the tech giant whistleblower who eventually agreed to show me the algorithm did so at least pain of being sacked, if not worse. He threw a jamming field over the place where we were meeting. He was so paranoid. But finally, he did bring me face to face. Now, of course, I can't tell you which algorithm it is, but it's an algorithm which, suffice to say, everyone in this room makes decisions on a pretty regular basis. It's more than it's not necessarily Google search engine. So he brought me face to face with it. He tapped into his keyboard. He logged in. He built the thing. He was an algorithmist. He kind of spun his laptop around with this huge grin on his face. You know, the grin of a proud parent. And it was one of the most underwhelming things I think I've ever seen in my life. It was just a single screen covered in kind of bracketed text of different colours, a bit of red, a bit of green. In 3, out 4, sort by in degree, sort by node, a series of instructions. That was the algorithm. The reason I mention this story is twofold. First, although underwhelming at first sight, what I quickly discovered was that this was a house made of bricks themselves, entirely other houses. So the way in which you actually see the algorithm is an enormously abstracted form. Each of these little numbers, and there were hundreds scattered around a couple of hundred lines of code, was itself the product, often a function, a product of an entirely separate algorithm. And it essentially, in total, represented millions upon millions upon millions of lines of code. He kept stopping and going back and trying to work out what the thing did, and he got confused. And it convinced me, essentially, in about 4 hours that we spent actually plodding through his creation. The algorithmic transparency, at least in the way that I understand it, I can't see that really working. Because, I had no idea what was on there. He didn't have much idea what was on there. And I don't think if you just simply publish that code tomorrow, or even if you actually built quite a lot of things to help people understand the code, I'm not sure that would have helped much either. No, what it did convince me, however, was that he had at his fingertips as an algorithm maker an unbelievable latitude of power. So he jumped into it and he changed a single number from a 1 to a 2. And he reran the algorithm and half of reality was simply wiped out. And I said, how do you know that should be 1 in the first place? And he said, that's exactly the point. Exactly the point is that I have absolutely no oversight in how I build this to ensure that that's a 1. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a 1. It could be another number. Truth is dead, was the words that really stuck with me that he said. Truth is dead, there is only output. And the only kind of oversight would have been someone emailing him from his tech giant, whinging if the output of the algorithm started looking less clear. So the thing that I went away from seeing the algorithm believing that we really need it, but I think actually just as much as any kind of sense of data ownership or we as consumers, I think the algorithm makers have risen to be a new profession. I think they are just as powerful, in many ways much more so than doctors and lawyers, and they are a profession. They have a certain bundle of skills which gives them a kind of very great say over what I like to really like. And they are a profession in all but name. And the one thing they do not have, that the other professions do have, are any kind of professional standards. So I thought I'd come here to tell that story and simply to suggest, I won't talk again, sorry, this is a long story, this is my one show.
It's been a wild trip, yeah.
But, what I want to suggest is we need to create a royal college for algorithmists. We need to create some, we need the algorithmic version of do no evil. We need a Hippocratic oath. The first people that can begin to hold algorithm makers to account are other algorithm makers. And it should at least be considered to be, to essentially make you exposed to being struck off if you start using data, ingesting it, analysing it, producing it in ways which are societally harmful. So I wanted to kind of challenge it really. I think quite often we understand this to be a kind of issue of consumer power and consumer rights against tech giants. Well, there's actually quite a lot that we can do to actually hold the people within those tech giants to greater account by using each other to do so.
Right, excellent. Thank you for that. If I remember correctly, in the US stats, for example, data scientist is one of the fastest growing professions by far. It's like a bunch of sort of nursing, kind of like elderly care professions, and data scientist is in there. So you're definitely right there. And Hera, sort of pivoting off that, which is talking about its awful story of the little people versus the tech giants. But the area where you operate in, it's like small business and the government. And when we talk about the economy, we're not just talking about Apple and Amazon, and Google and Facebook. There's the public sector economy as well. And there's an absolutely enormous amount of data that they have. Give it away, sometimes they hoard it, all this kind of stuff. You just, from your perspective, when you think about data ownership, these kinds of things, how would you wrap it up?
Thank you. Well, let me start with one thing, which is I am the real Hera Hossain. I know you saw another one this morning, but it is possible to have South Asian women who are different and have different names. So yes, I am not Rachel. I am Hera, and there was a confusion earlier, suppose. But everybody got the joke. You all laughed. Great. So I work for a nonprofit which encourages governments to collect and publish data on public procurement.
It is the world's largest marketplace for goods and services, $9.5 trillion, which means if you stack them up as $1 bills, they would go to the moon and come back. That is how important public procurement is. It sounds boring as hell, but it is so important. And what's interesting is that governments, governments spend our money to procure things from boots for armies all the way through bridges and houses and hospitals. But there's a huge inefficiency gap there. And there's a huge, number one, corruption risk as well for governments. So we believe that getting governments to publish that in open data means that everyone can see everything. What's interesting is that when we started doing this, we thought we were going to get a lot of pushback from business because, being civil society, you're like, well, businesses really want. But in fact, we've had a lot of support from businesses because what they find is, let's take the example of Ukraine. After the Maidan Revolution, they did a corruption perception in the country, and most businesses thought that the procurement was very corrupt. After they implemented open contracting, like data standard, which allows governments to publish data, the corruption perception was decreased by half. So because they felt like they actually had a chance, they could see who got how you apply for tenders, they could see their bids, they could see who won, they could compare. So that sort of level of transparency is super important, especially for the little guys, or the small businesses, the women-led businesses, the minority-led businesses who have less resources. And it's the asymmetry of power, which is really important. So when we talk about data privacy, I think it's really important to talk about transparency as well, because the asymmetry of power is where the real imbalance lies. And governments spend our money, and we're supposed to trust them to spend it well. But evidence, reams and reams of evidence suggests that it's not true. There's an example from LA where they said that we're working with the city to make their process better for procuring goods. And they said that one of the procurement officers said that if I spend one more hour in going through the documentation that I need to go through, one homeless person doesn't get to sleep tonight. So that is how important. And one of the bids, for one of their contracts, the bids are the documentation people need to provide is so big that they need to come in a lorry because the stack of paper is this much. In average for the UK, a supplier was telling me it's 420 pages to apply for a contract. But if you look at governments, transparency portals, $500 million contracts, and you cannot find who they went to or if they were ever fulfilled or not. So there's great asymmetry of power in terms of data itself.
So I think we heard Tim Jones earlier talk about the Housing Rules report, and one of the things that that report flagged was the importance of the CMA, the Competition Markets Authority, taking a really serious look at these monopolies of power. We talked about monopolies earlier, and the description given was, if you wanted to, if you had a dispute with Google, so actually they're abusing their powers to use Google, and then you realise an hour later that you can't. It's not actually a choice. That's the definition of a monopoly, right? That's like saying, I'm really peed off with my train provider. I'm not going to use them anymore. Damn it! I live in the suburbs and I have to get to London. That's a monopoly provision. So, and the CMA, I think, is beginning to make that important. But there's something really important here because directly to the point of this panel, which is the growth agenda and so on, it's the startups, it's the SMEs. That's where you get real change and disruption. The incumbents don't want anything to change. If you go to the professions, there's the flip side of this, which is a huge degree of complacency and incumbency in the professions, which actually, if they would release and allow some innovation into each of those sectors, we might see some real change for consumers. And so one of the things that we're doing with Law Science is we co-sponsor an incubation space with Barclays and 10 other law firms to try to bring the startup community together to say, okay, here's a whole bag of use cases where legal problems are an issue and they're really expensive to resolve. Can we use tech to deliver the answers in a way that makes it cheaper and faster? But essentially, that is a model which disrupts the incumbency, and it's really important.
Would Carl's licensing scheme be introducing bureaucracy to that then, and sort of doing the opposite of what you suggested?
So, I mean, actually, so really interesting. What I wanted to pick up on was, first of all, this point about the
So what defines professionalism is a core set of commonly agreed standards and ethics, a real adherence and belief, a consensus. Now, one of the things that we don't have in any of this space is a clarification of that consensus. I disagree that we need a guild of data scientists. Actually, that would be possibly the worst place to simply done. Because I truly believe the answers that come to bear as we use these technologies in societies, and I find those answers to a multidisciplinary approach. What we want is, I want, and this is going to sound like a really bad dad joke, I want an anthropologist, a political scientist, a lawyer, a computer scientist, an ethicist. I want them working on these issues together to find solutions and set global standards, because they will have to be global. There's no point in having a saying. So one of the pieces of work that we're doing is a year-long exploration of use of AI in the justice system. So there are 20 plus parolees in the US already using predictive analytics to decide whether or not someone gets parole. We're using AI-enabled custody augmented tools, AI-augmented tools in Durham Constabulary for custody decisions. We're using AI predictive analytics to judge which streets we're going to police. We're using facial recognition systems very badly, so we're trading on white faces and brown, things like using cardboard and so on. And the answer to that is not that I, as the legal professional, stand waving my finger at the tech people and say how badly they've done their jobs. They did their jobs as well as they could do. The framework of what good looks like, and I said earlier, growth is the driver. That's exactly what tech is there to do in that space. It's our job as part of a broader conversation to bring them into a consensus space that says, okay, good for a society looks like this, we're going to pass some standards like that might be. And there's a spectrum of regulation. Regulation doesn't always come in capital R, right? It comes from industry standards all the way through to primary legislation. All of that is up to playing around.
Does that go far enough?
No. I'm glad people are using the word power, because that's what my book's about.
Can you get more content in your book?
No, I mean, so power is important. And no, look, fundamentally, the economic logic of the digital age is breaking capitalism. There's no accident that the tech giants have risen to each, not only to successfully compete in, but to dominate industry verticals. There's no accident that that's happening at all, and it's happening more and more. So as essentially giant kind of colossus, globe-striding platforms move into more and more and more industries, obviously they are eating one market after the other. Now, the reason for that is actually quite simple. There are two drivers. One is platform effects, and the other one is data aggregation. A platform, be it Google, Facebook, Apple, or anyone else's, becomes exponentially more valuable the more people you have within it. So a very large platform is hugely more valuable than even a slightly smaller platform. Secondly, is that data becomes valuable when it's aggregated, not when it sits alone. So that's why Google makes it very, very hard for any other search engine to compete against it. MapReduce and the other kind of technical things that Google has done are actually quite well understood by everyone else. It's the size of searches that they have and the data that they've got and what people click on after they search for something. That's what makes Google impossible to compete with. Now, that has meant that, I mean, the whole point of capitalism, the whole point of the Competition and Markets Authority essentially has been to try and protect free and open competition in each market. That's their job. The problem is that now they are faced with the kind of prospect that actually the digital age isn't going to be one which has thrived in a series of near-peer competitors that are thriving and competing against one another in order to make better products and win over consumers. That's not what's going to happen. That's not what's going to happen at all. We're going to see one of three outcomes. Has anyone been reading Marx recently? Because I have. Genuinely, for the first time in quite a long time, I picked up Marx. Because what seems to be happening is essentially what Marx said was going to happen. I promise, I'm not actually a communist. But genuinely, what we're seeing is a huge agglomeration of capital into one place. More and more capital into a smaller geographic and organisational circumference. And that means either we have a crisis of capitalism, or there's a political intervention to break them up, or some other disruptive technology comes along and from all of that peripheral vision does it for us. One of those three things is going to happen. Mark my words, that is my prediction. Because at the moment,
enforce that?
I would say the first two are probably sequential. Right? You get massive inequality that drives political action. I don't think they are either or necessarily. I suspect, which is what we're seeing on this debate of I want to own my data, which people get strong reference to it. That's not because people genuinely want to be, they want a little purse in which you want to put your data, you can take access to this and go here, you can use it. They want agency, they want to give some form of control, transparency as to where it's being used. And why is that? Because there's huge unease that are being utilised not only for the profit of others, but in a way that they're getting nothing back. So being given, to give requires you to both trust and know and willingly engage in that relationship. That's not what happens in most instances. And that's just a small example of what that means. And if that unease grows, the inequity of the visible conglomeration of power and money into very, very, very gets bigger, then the stronger we'll get these signals. And Trump and Brexit and the whole backlog of things are just simple signals that tell us that we don't have traditional economic wealth provided in a way that's necessarily real sustainable society and definitely resist.
I disagree. I think it's going to be number 3.
Blockchain. We have to say it, right? Has anyone said it yet? All right.
Which one did you say it was?
It's going to be disruptive technology. I mean, inside these sprawling, enormous, astonishing, breathtaking primary color campuses in Silicon Valley, they feel a lot less secure than they look from the outside. In every room, there's posters urging everyone to move even faster. There's missives pouring out of Jeff Bezos about how Amazon needs to be a one-day startup every single day. Don't have a manager in Amazon describe your idea as day 2. It doesn't see day 3 after that. Everything needs to be day 1. Move fast and break things. So they know they have to be like startups because they know there are people gunning for them in their own assets and shares and carry with everything else. I do wonder, however, whether it's a political intervention or a technological one, quite how that will happen. Because we've got to the point now where these companies are genuinely so fantastically powerful that their political power is incredible. By the way, I actually think that within tech giants, there's plenty of people trying to do the right thing almost all the time. I mean, I don't think they're staffed full of evil people. I think it's a structural problem. But they are unbelievably politically powerful. They have thousands and thousands and thousands of lobbyists all over the place. Sometimes they're just putting their view forwards in the way that every company has a right to do so. But often I think steer conversations around very difficult ones for them, like what the monopoly looks like in which for them. But also technological. So one of there was a hangar in one of the tech giants with hundreds of people in it, simply scanning the world, looking for disruptive interventions which might better their business model. And when they see one, they buy it. And they see another one, and they buy that.
That's why competition policy has a really useful deployment in the short term. CMA can say no.
I mean,
on a chain, you have to change the framework for how this is possible.
So one question I want to throw out rhetorically to all of you, but literally to my fellow panelists, is why on earth hasn't CMA moved this? I mean, the idea that it's only becoming visible now that the tech giants represent potent new forms of monopoly is a nonsense. I mean, we've had 10 years of seeing these things grow, and why we haven't in the UK began to even redraft monopoly law yet? I mean, it's genuinely a mystery to me.
We'll leave that one floating there just for now. But we have some time for questions and comments from the floor. Maybe one or two real good ones, zingers. Right here.
Yeah, I just want to quickly throw a question out to any of you about a topic I haven't really heard much about today, but it's pretty pertinent to discussions about disruption and new technology possibly into the sector and bringing forth new ideas, and that's just the idea of the blockchain. And I'm curious to see if you see that as a credible force, even in the concept of regulation, whether that be regulation by communities as opposed to an institution, the idea of controlling and owning your data and tech disrupting the sector and taking power away from centralized sources. What do you think about blockchain?
I'll put it really quick. So I think very interesting ideas. I've yet to see a working use case that's actually going to deliver. There's lots of talk, quite a lot of investment of exploration. Has real potential in certain areas. You see area its last election count on the blockchain, or it has to solve the identity equation, which is probably the most important.
So I'll do something funny. I have been in so many rooms with governments who literally cannot connect a single line of spending with contracts, but want to implement a blockchain system. So, like, if you cannot track your spending, I'm sorry, you should not be doing blockchain.
Microsoft Word.
One more.
Okay. That's.
Hey guys, my name's David, and I work at TCS, and we work on technical chambers, and I'm the writer of the company. Carl, you mentioned about algorithms, and you used to hold the algorithm is in account. You mentioned something about like creating a school, that to be provisioned by the government, by the people, and how do we then gain trust of those people in order to make sure that their values are in line, especially in a capitalist society?
Great question. One of perhaps a dispute between us two. No, I think they do. I think they should have a guild. So I think the model that we have is that other professions have self-regulatory structures. So they, as a profession, come together. They come up with quite clear codes of conduct. They come up with some enforcement mechanisms, and when people break those codes of conduct, they are out. You know, so a doctor or a lawyer or an architect or a what are the others? Accountants. They all have professional bodies, and we should have that. So that's what I mean. So technically, who owns that? Not quite the government. Usually, it's a royal charter or something like that actually establishes it. But in my eyes, the first and easiest and smallest step forwards. But it's not going to. This is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the story. The first way we can begin to actually put a few rules around how this tech is actually built is by getting the tech makers themselves to agree upon some very basic ways in which their skills and power can be used, and then agreeing that they will do those things. But for instance, dark patterns, you know, was all this. Everyone Google that after this. There's millions of ways in which
it goes to the link to his book.
all the addictive use of technology. You know, there's ways in which our understanding of gambling are literally weaponized within the platforms that we use. So there are quite a lot of patent, obvious, clear, abusive ways in which tech has been built that a professional body or professional charter could actually just identify and then amend.
Yeah. It's been a great discussion. Thank you for your first word. No, we're not done. We're not done. We're almost done. I'm going to take my chair's prerogative and just very briefly at the end, I want all of you to respond to something. The organizers put out a report yesterday, a survey, and I wanted to hear your answer to this basically. And the quote was, led by our data, we've compiled the following practical and achievable recommendations. And number one is individuals must behave well online. Sounds like a tall order to me. And so I'm just kind of curious, when it comes to data ownership and whatnot, what do you think that means? You know, what can we all do when we go away to behave well online, whether that's sort of taking ownership of our data or reaching out to a regulator or joining a guild or whatever. I mean, you know, in the shortest time possible, tell me like what we can do from the bottom up now.
So I would say engage with debate. So it's a route to busting the potential. Actually, I truly believe that there are some steps that we can be taking much more specifically in our areas. So if either there is a debate or there's always an opportunity to point that these areas and these companies are not full of people wanting to do evil. There is always an opportunity to try to have that conversation and try to build a consensus on the area.
I would say take the Tactical Tech Security in a Box course, which tells you exactly where your data trail is. So you learn about where you leak data points as you go through your day. And the second thing is to also think on the flip side and think what data you think you should be able to have access to from government and you don't.
Begin a PhD to lay out what our new Royal College for Algorithmists should look like, and what charter of responsibilities it to enforce.
Which royal family member should be the chair? Great. Well, thank you very, very much to Hera, Sophia, and Carl for a very lively discussion, and thanks to you all for joining us. Thank you very much.
Right, so it's very warm in here, so we are going to have a quick break. But before we do, we've announced so Sebastian and Sophia will be at the table at the back. They're going to be signing people up for the crowdfunder. There is a one-day offer of 50% off membership. If you go back and have a chat with them, I've signed up. I think I'm number 4 on there on the platform. Yes, 4th group, number 4. So yeah, so go and have a chat with them. I think for me, it's I'm putting my money where my mouth. I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and saying I really believe in it. So I've signed up. It would be great to have one people on board. Please go and have a chat. We will kick off at 4 o'clock on the dot. So if you could get back here 5 to, great. Thank you. Go get some fresh air. See you later. Yeah. So it is my great honour to introduce our next guest. Emmanuel Speaks is a spoken word poet from East London. His bio is amazing, but we just had a little chat and I said to him, what is your poetry about? And he says, he wants to tell the stories of a generation, and I thought that that is enough as an introduction to him. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Emmanuel Speaks.
FGM, or as acronym stands for female genital mutilation. In fact, hands up if anyone knows what it stands for. Does anyone want to quickly run on stage and tell us? Yes, no, maybe. Oh wait, it's cool. I'll go all day. I'm joking. Female genital mutilation is it's a process often carried out in many African countries whereby some partial or total removal of the external part of a female's genitalia, and it's often done involuntarily, if not always done involuntarily, in often unsanitary conditions. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to express this in a way which I knew best, this is poetry. So I want everyone to do in the room right now is close their eyes. I want you to imagine a young girl, let's say she's 5'2", chestnut skin smooth, with a smile to light up the room, but her eyes told the truth. See an angel in you, but your wings are missing. I've asked for you to spare me details of what you've been through now. We've been friends more than a minute, but I can never quite envision where the deep-set barrenness of your stare has stemmed. Elephants never forget, and tonight, it's not just me and you, there's an elephant in the room. The story goes back centuries. It's walked the planet and sailed in over 28 African countries. Its older brand represents over 6,000 girls a day. This elephant has the heart of a lion but feels nothing. It was promised Zion, but its happiness was cut. No, literally, its happiness was cut. Tonight, it's not just me and you. There's an elephant in the room. So she slowly spoke the story of the elephant before me. As a child, she sits eyes wide on a flight back to the motherland, and she grips her mother's hand because right now, the only fear she knows is falling from a height. The only pain she feels is from the turbulent and sleepless night. She thought it was just a holiday. So I had nothing to say when the family came to the decision it was time for circumcision. From the skies, the lights looked pretty. In the sky, she left the city to a place where the roads were green. The only stories the buildings had belonged to the people that lived in. The front yards were animal ridden. The little boys stayed out playing chase outs while the little girls stayed in, they were baking. It was far from her idea of vacation, but it was too late when she came to realization. She lay next to the table with razors and a scalpel. They said terror is weakness, so she holds a mouthful. Because crying and screaming would be her downfall. There's no room to see, no room to breathe as she's held down by arms she'd never seen in her life. No room to see, no room to breathe as one barely cleanses the end of a knife. Imagine the sensation of 1,000 burning suns invest your body, and you look around for someone to save you, but everyone you turn to is part of the issue. Imagine being sewn up as if it was all just an accident. Imagine the shame. She didn't allow herself to go through this pain. I said, tonight, it's not just me and you. There's an elephant in the room. So she lay next to the table with razors and a scalpel shaking because the elephant had just drowned. The blood felt cold on her naked back. She lost her womanhood, but at least her alignment with her culture was intact. 20 years later, she's 5'2", chestnut skin smooth, and a smile to light up the room. Her eyes told the truth. And I look into your eyes deeper than the craters of Mars. This creator of ours is made a masterpiece. Scars are like art, each a careful stroke of Michelangelo. You're my Sistine Chapel scene. That's the only way to describe this feeling. Is to be from your fingertips, a sculptural creation with its beauty and the roughness in your edges. They say the bones are built in a day. Your incompletion is what completes me. Your void gives me a purpose to make you whole again, give you a soul again. And I see your pain, I see memories through the blemishes of our relationship. I see memories through the blemishes of our relationship. And if I was to be here today, I'll be here with you. Please. Thank you. promise that not all of my pieces are depressing. Some of them are light-hearted, but I feel like I have a responsibility as someone who does go around speaking in stages like this and other similar to kind of like Ada said, tell the stories of a generation. I have a responsibility to put experiences not just to myself but my friends into my art, because that's the only way that we're hurt. Am I right? Cool. We're gonna get into my next piece. July this year, I spoke at TED against London, my very first TED talk. It's alright, you like my very first TED talk, and something that I describe as potentially, in fact, completely the most phenomenal experience I've ever had. And I'm going to share with you guys one of the pieces from the talk. Is that cool? Yeah. Are you sure? Some of you don't. Is that cool? Yes. Around the world manifests the reckoning. A point in every boy's life, this ball drops and he faces a testicle. Wait, no. Testicle. Manhood. The first time he hears be a man, this mandatory mandate, be a man, they say no excuses, boy, you got to manage life with a firm hand and an iron fist. Raise your chin and separate your heart from your head. Disconnect all emotions until you fail to see that you're broke. Boys don't cry, so from this point onwards, we learn to hold them inside. You knew man up could weigh a man down, so we've lost the true definition of a man now. It's an inherent blindness where we forget that the only unbreakable code is kindness. Being mankind, the real value of a man rises on how much you can love, how much you can be loved. Not ask you to change who you are, just be who you are. Don't be afraid to look in the mirror and see who you are. Masculinity begins with a mask. That's prevalent. Take it off, remove the line, let unity take precedence. Thank you. Enjoying it so far? Yeah. How long have you guys been here? I just came, so sorry, I'm very late. But yeah, good day so far? Fantastic stuff. I know I'm kind of short for time. I was told I have 5 minutes. I'm taking about 8. I mean, I was late as well. This is just rude of me. Sorry, I'm not a rude person. I'm a nice guy, really. Come and say, oh, have a chat with me after. I'm a nice guy, I promise. But I got one more piece to share with you guys. Is that cool? Yeah, cool. Let's run the next one, DJ. Talking like it's a rave, it's not. See, sometimes your ability to open a jar is not defined by how strong you are. There's this small thing called friction, and it acts as a resistance, so you could use all your might. And your hand slip and slide, and the mind not ever open. Or you could use a cloth, avoid the huff and puff, and then it comes off. See, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I ain't lying when I say hunger isn't just from your stomach, it stems from where your heart is at. My friend Nigo said practice shouldn't make perfect. So when you're on stage, sitting in the examination room or halfway through an interview and you find that it isn't going quite how you rehearsed it, and you start to feel worthless, that's when it should bite that hunger. Swallow your pride so you can hold on that little bit longer. There's off the glass ceiling that's above it so you can make it through legit and show them you're the shit. And if you ask me how often I thought about what tomorrow holds or knows, I would say yesterday, that's yesterday, and yes, today. Yeah, I know my pieces are starting to sound the same, but my impatience is a virtue. I urge you to put first what concerns you. Looking back to when Nigo had to give me money for studio, he said, you'll make it back, bro, you'll grow. Why not put mine in straight to paid shows? I'm not trying to boast, but I suppose that shows. Take no skill, circumstance can quickly change. I didn't dream about this, I just woke up and got out of bed that I made myself. I don't do this for views, this is how I save myself. When the SU at Essex University said that I should perform or pay my own entry, I didn't let my ego treat me because it's more than now, it's about a legacy. I'm more in love with the word playing than when the words pay. I said, let me explain my word Smith. So when I say there's a will, there's a way, please focus on what I'm trying to say. We're all in this pursuit of happiness, and I won't stop until I am legend soul. After earth is nothing but a memory to your soul. Ask your souls what seeds you would have sown. I could have easily sold myself to the rose, but instead I rose and continued to blossom. So I got way too much on to eat. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Emmanuel Speaks. Thank you very much for having me.
And continuing on the theme of new leadership to change the world, we are now going to link to a video of Joshua Wong, Secretary General for Demos Cisco. So if we can play the video, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Joshua Wong from Hong Kong, activist and also Secretary General of Demo System. Thank you for the invitation from Alvin. It's my honor to have shared in this conference. Originally, I get a plan to take a flight, travel abroad, and to join this conference organized by the fourth group. Unfortunately, I still on bail pending appeal, and now still have certain court case. Now have scheduled on next year April. It caused the government to restrict my freedom of movement, and I'm not allowed to travel abroad to anywhere. As the one who have been locked up in prison last year, jail because of organizing the civil disobedience, I hope to share my experience how to mobilize people in the digital age and how to organize massive movement, no matter on internet or on civil society development, to enhance and encourage all people around the world to realize the possibility for us to make change in the society. I'm the one who lives in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the place under the rule of Chinese Communist Party, but it's not directly inside the territories of mainland China. According to the Sino-British Joint Declaration, Hong Kong people deserve high degree of autonomy. Hong Kong peoples rule Hong Kong, which refer to the international treaty of one country, two system, which means we are under the rule of China, but we have a different system. In Hong Kong, we deserve certain degree of free flow of information, and also at the same time, we deserve freedom of press, economic freedom, and etc. That's what we deserve, and I'm the one who born a year before the transfer of sovereignty. And the reason for me to organize the umbrella movement 4 years ago to ask for free election, to advocate for one person, one vote, is because I believe we should ask for equal rights for people instead of just allowing pro-Beijing tycoons or elite to vote and elected the leader of the city. It's more important to let Hong Kong people to elect the leader, which means the chief executive of our hometown. I would say that because of organizing this massive civil disobedience to occupy the role for 79 days, as the one now is still 22 years old, 4 years ago is just 18, get the student ID during the movement. I would say that pay the price of being jailed, prosecuted, or even threatened by China. It's not the things that easy to be overcome. But I would say that what I hope to encourage people is to realize the possibility of youth quick. Youth quick is the word chosen by Oxford Dictionary last year, which means youth can make change. Instead of just allowing the generation of baby boomers dominating the upper class to be the decision maker, I believe youngsters in the world, no matter they live in Hong Kong, they live in Asia, they live in UK or other European countries, instead of just allowing or wait until we graduate from university to make change, I believe no matter we're still in school or even we might be judged by others that we might not be qualified, I would say that it's not a must for us to totally rely on the standard set by the one who owns the power in the society. That's the reason for me to keep on this fight. I would say that fight against the threat of China is not an easy thing. But in the previous 5 or 6 years journey to advocate for free election and democracy, I realized that apart from confronting Chinese imperialism, we are also responding to the world development. In the recent years, especially in the digital age, social media become the platform to dominating people's discussion on politics. We realize on how uprise of right-wing movement, the populism trend happening in the country. And also it seems that democracy face certain retreat and might step backward. Instead of having the democratization trend moving forward, we face a lot of backfire, hesitation around the world. Especially, it's not easy for us to deal with in such an information age. How to effectively communicate with others with different political opinions. When fragmentation or diversity might be common things happening around the world. I would say that how youngsters in Hong Kong, we organize the movement, mobilize more than 1 million people come to the street to result in the umbrella movement against the tear gas and lead the movement by university students. Look to inspire more people around the world. Be the change we want to see. We might have a lot of hesitation, but it's no reason for us to step backward. If we hope our world in the 21st century, it can have a better future. It's time for us to stand up and voice out our idea. And it's time for us to make change. I would say that with my journey to fight for democracy and also ask for free election, hello everyone.
I think there might be a bit more, sure. Is there some more? Is there more or is that it?
Really?
Is that it?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so a circulated video. And quite, he highlighted some of the issues that we take for granted, I guess, in the West. But I know he's not here, but certainly we can pass our best wishes to him. So round of applause for what's going on. That's a good fight. Okay, so no good all-day session would be complete without some sort of group discussion. So we're going to have a group discussion now. There's 4 people facilitating. There's myself and Adam facilitating. We're also joined by Neil Lawson, who is the chair of Compass. Neil, if you want to wave for us, and we're joined by Chris Langdon, who's the co-author of the book Thinking the Unthinkable. Chris, just wave over that. Right, so what we're going to do is we've got 4 questions that we want to discuss. I'm going to split into the 4 corners of the room. So Chris and Neil are going to take one. Chris is going to take that corner. Neil is going to take this corner. Myself and Adam take these corners. So myself here, Adam over there. So Chris's question. Chris, you want to wave for us, everyone? Chris's question is: what does it mean to be a leader in the digital age? What does it mean to be a leader in the digital age? I almost said be a dealer. Yeah, cool. The other, in this corner, we're going to have Neil. He's going to ask the question: how can we tackle new issues caused by tech as individual leaders? How can we tackle new issues caused by tech as individual leaders? Ada's going to take that corner over there. The question she'll be answering is: how can we tackle new issues created by tech as a group of leaders? So tackle new issues created by tech as a group of leaders. And in my group, what we can practically do now, tomorrow, 6 months, and in 2 years to make a difference. What we can practically do now, tomorrow, 6 months, and in 2 years to make a difference. So what I want you to do is go to the question that most appeals to you. Go
to the question that most appeals to you. We can start moving on. So Chris's question, what does it take to be a leader in the digital age? Neil's question, well, how can we address challenges of tech as individual leaders? Alice's question, what can we do to challenge face challenges of tech as a group of leaders? And this question will be going forward. So get up, move around, and go to the question that you most wish to discuss. Don't be lazy and just sit at the table that you're at already. I think that's the intention. Come on, let's get up and just move around a bit and have that chat. If there's too few people in one particular table, I will ask people to move over. So if someone's going to be sparse, go over there, have a chat. Go to the table if you like. Okay, so at your tables, we're going to have an 8-minute discussion with the aim of providing feedback at the end of the session. So at the table, we've got about 8 minutes. 8 minutes. 8 minutes to have the discussion, we're going to have some feedback afterwards. So let's sit down and have a chat for 8 minutes. We're going to do some feedback afterwards. Maybe have some mood music at the back, maybe to keep people going, I don't know. But yeah, 8 minutes.
I can go. Yeah, I'm going to get water. Okay, well, your job. Yeah, we are not going to be able to.
This is your 2-minute warning. This is your 2-minute warning. 2 minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's time. That's time. Good discussions. I think my table was probably the best. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. We're going to do some feedback now. There's a microphone on one of the tables. What we want, keep it short, just a quick 2-minute feedback on what you discussed on the table. So we'll start with Chris Langdon's table, and they're answering the question, what does it mean to be a leader in the digital age? So, can you tell us, what does it mean to be a leader in the digital age?
We had a really great conversation. I can't possibly summarize what the richness of it. And we could have gone on for much longer. But there was a clear sense
about values and purpose and good communications and storytelling are important skill sets of leaders, but also a point of view that a leader who is responsive, they don't have to be super charismatic, but engaged in a digital age is really important. We were just beginning a track looking at, in a society where we have some people who are very digitally engaged, like all of us in this room, what about those who are left behind? We were literally, just as the bell rang, discussing how does leadership change given we have new technologies coming down the track. Chris, my namesake, across the table, also said, in terms of technology, we now have new technologies which allow us all to be leaders in different ways, and we have a discussion about leadership and followership, whether everybody wants to be a leader, which is something that I would argue, or whether some people will prefer to follow, but within those who want to follow, I think we all agree around the table, there is an issue of taking responsibility. And I want to say both in this discussion and those that I've heard during the rest of this event, which I'm thank you for inviting me, I thought it's a really thoughtful and insightful comment. So thank you for this table and for everyone. Thank you.
Just very quickly, do you want to tell us a quick bit about your book?
I wrote a book with a former television presenter, Nick Gowing, looking at why leaders, to use Joshua's terminology, baby boomers, are failing so badly. We say that the conformity that got most of the current leadership to the top means that they're unable to understand this age of disruption. And our key message from a series of case studies around the world is organizations and companies which are engaging where the leader is being humble and opening, they don't know all the answers in this world of wicked problems, and engage and empower their staff, which by definition means some from the younger and the next generation of leadership. Those are the ones who thrive on change. Those that remain ossified, hierarchical, and structured are doomed to fail.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we're going to go on to the next. I was hoping to play relay, actually. No, let's do relay. Let's do a relay. So let's pass the microphone from that table to this table. Yeah, keep on. Yeah. Someone can get up and just run, sprint. There we go. Right.
So we had a really great conversation as well, discussion on lots of points, and trying to make sense of the discussion. It was really, really good. But some of the things we can do individually as leaders is be authentic. Someone spoke about social media, unfortunately, sometimes breaks the layer between those who are using and those who are following. So we said, if we are authentic and perhaps that shines through in our house, which there's an ability to make points in social media who are listening to the points. Another thing is leading by example. So an example is given like echo chambers. It's pretty uncomfortable to step out of the echo chamber and constantly arguing with people who disagree with you. But if you as a leader do that, you show people there's a greater propensity perhaps to follow you. Another thing we spoke about is tech events. There are lots of tech events about tech, not enough about how we use tech with tech. And that's not just kind of say social media, but say spectrum of tech encompasses. There have been a discussion about why and how we use tech. I guess one of the most important things that we can set up and make Canva is this notion of accepting the findings of as a leader. I think most people don't see themselves as tech leader, but if you kind of think of yourself as a leader, you can actually change common norms and tech work. So for instance, like social media, one we can do for audit trails, taking things offline sometimes to kind of online reality, offline ones. And lastly, what someone said was about we need to help people start feeling more responsibility about the collective, not just the individual. Those are all the points I want to talk about.
Great, thank you. You had a kind of report on the table. Right, we'll go on to the next one. And just keep in mind, this isn't the live stream of Joshua Wong, because I'm looking at us unimpressed on the screen. I don't know, he's just frozen on that. So don't worry about him. Right, that table over there, please you answer the question, how can we tackle new issues created by tech as a group of leaders?
So we had an interesting discussion on the table around, but the one I'm most not impressed more, how do I say it? I believe towards is the use of a public health approach to solve problems caused by technology. So public health approach, if you're not aware, is an all-encompassing approach to treat any problem like a disease essentially. So it's an early intervention program where you use different types of departments to help solve problems. So you use the government, you use
examples of groups to help deal with problems caused by tech. Now, one of the main problems caused by tech is hate crime. Online anonymity, hate crime is infamous. If you go onto Twitter, I can go onto Twitter right now and I can probably see 10 to 15 hate comments about even on my tweet, and I'm probably tweeting about my breakfast. It's horrible what you can see on Twitter.
What was your breakfast?
Eggs and beans.
That's, yeah, what kind of, okay, well, I'll send you a hate tweet later.
So using the public health approach, we'll be working with the public, with the police to help ensure that this doesn't happen. Because there's no one point that you can point to whose fault it is. I mean, you have to work, the public and the police have to work together to ensure it doesn't happen. The police have to make sure they're monitoring social media to make sure that people aren't abusing this anonymity online. And the public have to make sure that they're reporting the system, because the police can't see it. They don't have the funds currently to make sure they're viewing and monitoring everything online. So the public health approach is the best way to treat new tech problems caused by, as a group, if you want to target these problems, you have to use the public health approach.
Great, thank you. We'll do a little sprint over. Who wants to sprint over and give the microphone over? On the hate crime thing, so I've been in comedy for 4 years, and in the last 4 years I've had 5 death threats. Now, 3 of them were basically bots, but 2 of them turned up to 2 of my gigs with knives. Completely true, and they weren't cooking. They were there to do something quite bad, and we had to call the police and get them arrested. So the hate crime thing is something quite personal, well, close to my heart as well. Unlike those knives which didn't reach anywhere near my heart. So that's good. Right, on that note, the next one, the final one we talked about was what can we practically do now, tomorrow, in 6 months, and in 2 years to make a difference, which was highlighted as multiple questions in one. So we put it down as what are the next steps we can take?
So to start with, we discussed actually reading the terms and conditions, potentially having sites on which companies breaking down with the best of, to make it more accessible so they know what's actually happening with our data. We also talked about digital policy to put pressure on politicians, be that as individuals or groups, to actually act on some of those points, and spreading awareness to our friends and family about data. And also plug time. So we also talked about making things more accessible, so the Common Sense Network does a lot of that, and I think one of the points was to follow us, I think. Is that right? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. Well, round of applause for everyone. You guys good discussion. So what are we doing now? Okay, we're going to take the last 2 minutes of the video. All right. So we are going to show you, you've heard the list of discussions we're having. We're going to show you the last 2 minutes of the video, and we've got closing keynotes. So can we play the video, please?
Stand loud and voice out our idea. And it's time for us to make change. I would say that with my journey to fight for democracy and also ask for free election, apart from against on Chinese imperialism and enhancing youth political participation, I just hope people around the world can keep their eyes in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a place that not only with skyscraper, or is not only a metropolis. It's the place with people organizing demonstration, and to let the world to know that it's not a must for us to fully 100% obey on the uprising China model. Instead of just keep silence on the human rights violation of Beijing government, we believe how Hong Kong, recognized as a financial city and also a protest city, can link up to the international community to let us uphold the universal value. So this is my general sharing. Unfortunately, I can't come to join all of you guys, but I hope my experience on how to keep up the courage and to show our determination and let people around the world to aware that we can make difference. And instead of allowing the one to dominate our future, it's the time for us to get back and regain the future of the world value. Thank you.
do is another quick little exercise to get us all not yawning. Although it's quite late now. We're going to wait for Chiamura MP to be here. Hopefully she'll turn up. So at the moment, if you could just stand up and face this way, then you guys will stand up and face that way, but face each other, so make sure it's like two lines facing one another. So stand next to each other in a line, facing one another. Very good. Yeah, in a line formation, like a good 4-4-2 solid England 4 line at the back. 4 line. And what we need to do is make eye contact with hopefully one other person across the room and walk straight up to them and have a quick chat with them about the 3 things you're going to take away with you today. So walk straight up to them, find the person, make eye contact with them now. Don't make it creepy. Just stare at them. Stare into their soul. And walk. Go. Go to the person you made eye contact with. Go to the person. Okay, now everybody stop, 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 stop. Now, look at someone else and make eye contact with them. Look at someone else and make eye contact with them. Don't be lazy, try across the room and lock eyes and go to that person. Now, same thing again. Right then, now we're going to have another pause, another stop, and we're going to do another final switcheroo for the afternoon. This is a good way to get some new names for your contact book. So if everybody can stop, everybody can stop, everybody can stop. Silence, s'il vous plaît. Silence, s'il vous plaît. Silence, please. Oh, flipping, it really does work. Now, make eye contact with someone else in the room. And look, I've noticed some of you have barely made 2 steps. So try and look across to someone else, make eye contact, and move now. Move now. Move to someone else. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Well done, that was very, very good. Take your seats. We're done now, thank you so much. Great little session. I'm delighted to see phones coming out, people exchanging Twitters, Tinder profiles, all sorts. So good. So you'd all like to take your seats, please. Yeah, what a good way to meet people. Creepy eye contact first, and then meet people. It just works, doesn't it? It's just weird. Right, so everyone can take their seats, please.
Hello.
Everybody, take your seats. I don't know what song that is, but you don't want to. I can sing it. Everybody, take your seats. There you go. Why was no one's impressed? A tough crowd. Right. I'm going to hand you over to Adam now.
Right. Right, we are at the end of the day. But last but not least, we have our keynote speaker, who is one who I've heard her speak before, wonderful speaker, very inspiring. We have Chi Onwara, MP, Shadow Minister, Industrial Strategy. If you'd like to join me on the stage.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for that introduction. And I'm not sure that I warrant it as a wonderful speaker, but it's a pity in a way that I'm your last speaker. Now, I would have loved to be here during the day and take part, but unfortunately there were some things going on in Parliament, like Brexit and education, you know, so that needed to be debated. And I'm going to get back for a vote. We hope a vote on education policy, though I know this is not political, but the Tories have shown a decided reluctance to actually vote on issues, which makes our job as opposition more challenging. But that's not what I came here to talk about. I came here to say, well, firstly, actually, to say thank you to the fourth group for this report. So I'm the Shadow Minister for Industrial Strategy, Science and Innovation, but I'm also, I'll talk a bit about that, a tech evangelist, and the reason that, one of the reasons I believe in technology is because its capacity to empower people, citizens, and we very rarely hear the citizen voice, and particularly not the global citizen's voice. So I welcome the report. I'm not going to say I agree with everything in it, but I really welcome the report because many of the conclusions it comes to are similar to ones that I came to working in the tech sector for 20 years and also as a regulator. And I think that the global citizen voice is absolutely essential if we're to make this new fourth, and I used to argue about whether it was the fourth, the third, or the fifth, but I've given up on that. So I'll just say, well, this new fourth industrial revolution work for everyone. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think that means. So I'm the Member of Parliament for Newcastle upon Tyne Central, which is a fantastic city in the north of England, for those of you who've never been past Watford. And I'm also Shadow Minister for Industrial Strategy, Science and Innovation. And before becoming an MP, I had what my constituents still like to call a proper job, which was as an chartered electrical engineer working in the tech sector. And it was growing up in the shadows of the greats of the first industrial revolution, such as Stephenson, Armstrong, Parsons, that's Rachel Parsons, the first female naval engineer and the founder of the Women's Engineering Society. That was what inspired me to study engineering as a young woman. And there weren't very many of us doing it then, or now for that matter. And the reason that, I was always interested in politics, but the reason I wanted to go into engineering is I believe that engineering and politics are the twin engines of progress. And I thought that as an engineer, I could make more progress than as a politician. It's something that I changed my mind on over my career. And one of the reasons for that, to be honest with you, is because one of the things that my career as a software engineer, hardware engineer, product manager, network engineer, and operations engineer, whatever the question, technology is never the answer on its own. Technology only works in the context of the people and the processes it works around and with. Now, techno-libertarians, which there are many, far too many, may deny it, but when it comes to technology, there is definitely such a thing as society. And unfortunately, the sector has a long, long way to go in terms of engaging with it. So I just got back Friday, I think it was, from Web Summit in Lisbon, the world's greatest concentration of tech sector, 70,000 people over 3 days, 5 halls, 7 stages. And in comparison with the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, in Las Vegas, which I also visited this year, it was less glitzy, it was more diverse, that's for sure. And there was more sort of the real virtual world. But the voice of ordinary people was nowhere to be heard. Yes, Tony Blair was there, but I wouldn't say he is the people's politician now, if he ever was. And there were a few other elected politicians, such as myself and the mayor of Vancouver, but there was no sort of non-techie third sector. It was entirely absent. There was no consumer rights groups, no citizens groups. And that mattered because it meant that Web Summit, which was great, it was a great event, but it was basically still tech talking to tech. And that has got to change because technology has lost trust. And as an engineer, I find it particularly heartbreaking the way that tech is the trajectory of boring. I used to be not ashamed, but hesitant to say I was an engineer at parties because people would basically fall asleep. So tech has gone from boring but useful to exciting but incredibly exploitative. And here in the UK, we had the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook exemplifying the dark arts, increasingly thought to be at the heart of the tech body corporate. I understand that earlier today you discussed the challenges posed to democracy by micro-targeting and hacking. And and I'll be interested to know what your conclusions were. And I think that on both sides of the Atlantic, some commentators and governments are waking up to this and other challenges. So we had the European Commission's £2.4 billion fine of Google, which I thought was the right fine for the wrong reasons, but at least it signaled a determination to hold the tech giants to account. And Transport for London insistence that Uber is a taxi firm underneath its tech cloak was also needed to improve their safety practices, was also a real step forward. I think that increasingly we can expect to see that so-called tech companies are regulated as real-world companies because their real-world impact is so great. But the problem is that such regulation is old world, generally ad hoc and incoherent. And to address that, we need to put people at the heart of technology. And we need to do this by tackling the 4 key challenges I say are posed by the new industrial revolution. And I'll just go through those briefly, and I'd be interested to know how much they reflected what you discussed today. So the first for me is who controls your data and why isn't it you? The report notes that that's one of the key issues for citizens today, and we have GDPR, but it's 7 years out of date. It barely takes account of AI or algorithms, and it completely ignores the Internet of Things, which is going to increase exponentially the generation of data, everybody is leaving increasingly data trails, and we still have no idea who owns it. Who will own and control the data which will be gleaned by all the devices? There's 60 billion devices which will be connected to the Internet of Things. Is one of the great issues of our time, and it's already getting too late because the facts on the ground mean that it is a free-for-all. The second challenge is what's going to be done with your data once it's captured. So we know that Google search algorithms can be gained by extremists. Now, I've been told that one major dating site operates its matchmaking algorithm for short-term relationships because that increases return business. And Uber knows you're likely to pay more for a ride if your phone battery is low, and it knows when your phone battery is low. Now, they say that they don't use that data, but there's no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing because their algorithms are locked tight, and there's no access to them for regulators or for government. And they say that, they're just a mirror to society, these algorithms. And it's not their responsibility what results are. But I don't think mirror is the right metaphor. By automating decision-making, algorithms industrialize bias. And they're only as good as the training data and the imagination of their designers. But given that their designers are likely to come from a very narrow demographic, that imagination is likely to be quite narrow too. So we need to be able to hold companies accountable for the unintended consequences of the algorithms in machine learning that are increasingly driving their profits. And that means opening up the algorithms so that regulation can access that. Now, The Sun, when I said this at the Labour conference, The Sun reported me as saying that Labour wants government to inspect applications for racism, which I thought was particularly amusing given that it is Facebook and other social media algorithms which The Sun cannot access, which increasingly mean that The Sun and print media are dying. So, what goes around comes around. The third challenge is diversity. And in Labour, for us, diversity is an economic and technological imperative. It's not an optional add-on. So technology won't reflect the needs of citizens until it is built and maintained by groups representative of citizens. When it is designed largely by white, male, relatively well-off engineers, it reflects their concerns. Now, I don't know how many of you have an iPhone. Quite a few. How many of you use the Health app? So when Apple developed the Health app, they wanted to make sure it supported all aspects of people's health. So all potential indicators of wellness, such as temperature change, weight fluctuations, exercise, diet, sleep, and it did. If you were a man, they forgot about periods. And the reason they did that was because not one person in the group designing them had one. And I think that is a great visible example of what is going on, which is less visible across the tech sector, which is that the people in the room or on the chat or in the GitHub developing these algorithms and these are not representative of the people who are going to use them. And the final challenge, I would say, is digital labor relations. So, what people refer to as the gig economy. Companies operate as online platforms, they don't own physical assets, and they claim to have very few employees. So, again, the Uber driver, classed as self-employed, doesn't get sick pay, training, or any of the rights you might expect. But you do have to own and maintain your own car and pay for your own petrol. Now, we welcome people taking control of their working lives. And again, technology offers huge potential for that and taking on the risk to start their own business. But Uber drivers don't enjoy the flexibility or freedom of genuinely self-employed workers. They're subject to the discipline of rating systems, again, closed algorithms, which impose harsh penalties on workers who don't conform closely to what the company wants. So self-employment used to mean freedom from a boss. Now it just means your boss is an algorithm. These practices are widespread, and you have nearly 500,000 workers, it's estimated by Citizens Advice, to be in bogus self-employment. And they are fighting back. And again, the labour movement is adapting sort of slowly to the 21st century. And we saw GMB's victory, the union GMB's victory in the courts last October on the Deliveroo strike, and further victories since then. But there isn't a coherent framework for that. And it is the lack of an effective regulatory framework which is hampering our ability to tackle these 4 challenges and make the new economy work for everyone. And I often say that the opposite of regulation is not no regulation, it is bad regulation. Too often, tech libertarians denigrate or reject the importance of regulation. They say that government has no right to regulate, or it's too dumb to regulate, or everything's fine, and if it isn't, blockchain will fix it. But unless there is an open, honest conversation and a debate right now about the right kind of regulatory framework, we're going to end up with a messy, ad hoc regulatory jungle as legislators respond in knee-jerk fashion to negative tabloid headlines. And the report highlights, I think it's particularly that debate, that conversation can't happen without the citizen consumer voice. Or at least if it does happen without it, then it will be ineffective. And the government, our government here, is unfortunately drowning in Brexit, and actually I know that, because it's just the capacity of any government department to do anything which is not Brexit is incredibly limited, given its own internal power struggles as well. So it is really, really, really at this time up to citizens and consumers to demand that governments do their job, and particularly here, where we have such a limited capacity in the current government. I would say Labour, under the Shadow Minister for Digital is Liam Byrne, and we're developing what we call a digital bill of rights and engaged in consultation with an online sort of crowdsourcing of potential potential measures for the People's Plan for Digital. And we've also promised to make tech more diverse by introducing diversity charters to keep companies accountable for their employment practices. But above all, and that's why I was keen to come here today, we believe, our fundamental belief, that technology should be putting people in control. Jeremy R. Corbyn has said technology should be empowering workers, enabling us to cooperate on a scale not possible before. And to end on a positive note, I still believe that's possible. I believe technology as a tool for people can deliver a better, more equal and more progressive world. But the tech industry needs to engage with the many and do that quickly, or it will soon find itself only on the side of the very, very few.
I would just like to, on behalf of all of us, thank you to that inspiring conversation. Sorry, that inspiring talk. And I think really valid points, and I think you covered some of the stuff that we talked about today during the discussions, and some of the keynote speakers, and some of the panel sessions. So we've come to the end of the day, and I would like to invite Alvin back to the stage just to close things up.
I started with a short don't remember. There you go. How you all doing? Wonderful. Are you ready to take on the world? Wonderful. To end, I just want to say we've had a lot of really important and also tough conversations. We've had some great speakers. First of all, I want to say a massive thank you to Chi again for giving our closing keynote speech. I'll be very short because we're about to get taken out by not robots but the security guards. So we've got to get out in a second. Big thank you first off to Ada, and Ishan. ALE, as you know, our co-hosts for leading us throughout today. Also, thank you to all of our speakers. Are anyone still here? I think Casey's still at the back. Thanks for moderating. I also want to say a very specific thank you to the whole team who made this happen. The Fourth Group itself is a mainly voluntary-led organisation. The thing about not being a business is that we have to organise and use our passion and our hard work and all of our extra hours to potentially sell consumer goods in the morning and then actually block the revolution in the evenings. Please, I want to say thank you to Cyril at the back. He's the guy who's created all this infographics in the report and also did the AV today. Thank you, Cyril. Thank you, Yue, who did the film, the amazing film earlier. She's a talented filmmaker and will be sharing those videos later on. So thank you, Yue. Sophia and Sebastian, SS, we've got them at the back here, signing you all up to United Citizens. Massive thank you. Sophia is actually the assistant editor of Forward, where we publish articles every month. And Sebastian is a guy who's helped us out on stakeholders and thinking about how we spread the word. So thank you both for helping. Trying to see if there's anyone else here. Tatseng has been twinning all today, but also has been behind the scenes as the operations guy. So all of the logistics, he's made it all happen. So thanks again, Tatseng. One final point is to say thank you to two people who aren't with us today. There's a guy called Alex King, there's another guy called Hazen. They were actually the guys who co-wrote the report you saw today, which again, as you can see, you can go to it and see it on weareunitedcitizens.org. They've done a great job. So when you do read it, just imagine them. They were literally in Lebanon, just writing. They met in a hostel randomly. One of them is a freelance writer, and others are community activists in the Middle East, and they co-wrote this report to represent the voices of citizens. So even though they can't hear you, please say a massive thank you to them too. Just to close, we've talked again a lot about the impact of technology on society. And in every generation, citizens and community groups and civil rights activists have come together to address the biggest political pressing problems that they face. Today, we have discussed many of the new issues, from privacy to inequality caused by the unequal access to some of these services, to the problems caused by the gig economy and some of the things that have just been mentioned by the Shadow Minister. There are big, big problems, but it is up to us as individuals and up to us as a group of people. I'm joined by the hundreds of thousands of people who are part of this community in different parts of the world to really stand up, have our say, and represent our interests. Today, we have launched the United Citizens to be that democratic institution where you have the power to shape who represents us and shape the campaigns we go forth with. So if you haven't bloody signed up, sign up at the back here. That was my impression of Nigel Farage. Bloody sign up. But I will be having a pint after this, so if you guys would love to join us, it would be great to have you there. Thank you so much. And for every industrial revolution, we need a civic revolution. And hopefully you can join us in shaping tech for good. Thank you.
Do you have link? I went to the safe route. Oh, you did so. Just to say, we'll be having drinks downstairs, if you guys are wondering where we're going to have it. So thanks so much.